Hello there. Tonight we travel back in time, but not to courtly banquets or nightly tournaments. No, you're heading down a muddy side alley in a medieval city, past the blacksmith's forge and the fishmonger's stall, to a place where the real stories live. There's no candlelight romance here. No velvet chaise lounges or soft harp music. Just you, a grimy wooden door, and the smell of stale wine, body odor, and something metallic, maybe blood, maybe rust, maybe both. You press forward anyway. Hey, you're brave, right? But let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck your head under the low door frame, stepping inside the brothel. The scent hits you instantly, thick, humid, almost meaty. It's not a gentle perfume of rosewater and musk like the movies pretend. No, this is the real stuff, sweat that's had time to ferment, wet straw, cheap ale, damp wool, and something faintly sweet that shouldn't be sweet. You're not sure whether it's the rotting meat on the table or the open sore on someone's face across the room. Either way, it sticks to your lungs. The floor beneath you squishes a little as you step. That's not poetic exaggeration, it's actually soft. Rushes are spread across the wood, a medieval trick to absorb messes. Think of it like a carpet, but made of hay and filth. You don't ask what's beneath it. Smart. A cat scampers past your feet, tail bent at a weird angle. Possibly broken. Possibly not a cat. There's definitely something moving in the rafters, and the buzzing around the oil lamp overhead is more than just a couple of flies. Close the door, a voice growls. You do, mostly to keep the outside air from escaping. Not that it was particularly fresh, but compared to this? Bliss. You're in what passes for a foyer. A few rough benches, a chipped jug of wine, and some suggestive paintings on the wall. You squint. Nope, not paintings. They're woodcuts, cheap ones. Probably recycled. That saint in the corner has definitely been rebranded as a brothel worker. A woman emerges from behind a beaded curtain. She's middle-aged, her dress once fine but now patched and stained, her makeup thick enough to coat a goblet. She looks you up and down, not flirtatiously, but clinically. Like she's trying to guess how much silver you've got and how much of it she can extract before you figure out the rules. New, she asks. You nod. Big mistake. Come to see the famous girls of St. Agnes Alley, have you? She chuckles, then snorts, then spits into a bucket near the door. The spit sizzles. Possibly from lime, possibly from something worse. Her name is Margot, you soon learn. Madame Margot. Not her real name, obviously. Nobody here uses real names. She ushers you forward with a hand that's missing a finger. Lost it in a tavern fight, she says. Bitten clean off. She doesn't say whose mouth did the biting. You don't ask. The deeper you go, the worse it gets. The lighting is dim, mostly tallow candles, which smell like burnt mutton, and a few smoking torches. You trip over a stool and apologize to it before realizing it's actually a drunk man in a bonnet. He grins up at you with only 2 teeth and mumbles something that might be blessings. Historically speaking, brothels in medieval cities were semi-legal at best. In places like London's Southwark or Paris's Rue des Lombards, they were tolerated so long as they paid taxes, and sometimes even regulated. The authorities turned a blind eye if the right palms were greased. Some even had guilds of sorts. Yes, prostitution guilds. Try not to be impressed. Fringe fact? Some brothels posted price lists outside, carved into wood. Full services cost more, obviously, but there were bargain nights. Market days were particularly busy. Supply and demand. You try not to think too hard about that. As Margot leads you down a corridor with sagging beams and cracked plaster, she points to various rooms and mutters names. That's Gertrude, specializes in whippings. Mars is the redhead, loves poetry. Don't bother with Alice, she's got the cough again. You don't ask what kind of cough. You already know. And now comes the strangest part. Amid all this decay, someone's trying to make it look festive. Ribbons hang from beams, likely faded remnants from last year's midsummer fair. There's even a crude wreath of dried flowers nailed to one door. The flowers are black now, or maybe just covered in soot. You pause to look and feel someone bump into your back. Move, a man grumbles. He's wearing armor. Not polished, gleaming plate armor, but dented mail and a leather jerkin soaked in something reddish. A mercenary, maybe. Or a guardsman off duty. His breath smells like boiled onions and regret. You step aside, trying not to make eye contact. He slams a coin into Margot's hand without a word and disappears behind a curtain. The fabric sways for a moment, revealing a glimpse of pale limbs and a laugh that doesn't sound happy. Historians still argue whether medieval brothels were purely exploitative prisons or offered some women more independence than marriage ever could. Some madams owned property, hired guards, and even lobbied city officials. Others were just pawns in someone else's game, property in all but name. You're starting to sweat now. Not from heat, though the place is sweltering, but from nerves. You don't belong here, and your body knows it. Every creak of the floorboard makes you flinch. Every glance feels like it's measuring you, and not just your worth in coin. You cough politely, hoping to signal discomfort. Margot mistakes it for eagerness. Well then, she says, licking her thumb and smoothing her eyebrows, let's see what you can afford. You open your coin pouch. And that, dear traveler, is your second mistake. Margot's eyes flick to the saggy little pouch in your hand like a hawk spotting a field mouse. You hesitate, too long. She snatches it, weighs it in her palm, and gives it a little jiggle like she's shaking dice at a tavern table. The smile that stretches across her face isn't quite joy. It's closer to hunger. You're about to ask for change when she mutters, decent. Won't get you velvet, but you won't be scrubbing the latrines, either. And that's how you learn that, yes, there is a price point low enough to land you in manual labor. This isn't a place of pleasure. It's a sliding scale of discomfort. She beckons with one curled finger, missing a fingernail now that you notice, and leads you through a warped doorway into the main hall. If the front room was the welcome mat, this is the showroom. A few oil lamps flicker against the soot-stained walls, casting long, squirming shadows. The floorboards creak in protest with every step. To your left, a woman in a patched blue dress is braiding another's hair with surprising tenderness. A third lies across a bench, fanning herself with a broken plate. No one looks up. No one greets you with the sultry hello stranger you expected from all those films. That's when Margot claps her hands once, sharp, commanding. Fresh meat, she calls out, and several heads do turn. Not in delight, exactly. More like you've just interrupted their dice game. The lineup begins. 3 women rise and form a haphazard semicircle in front of you. Margot rattles off names and prices like she's reading a menu. Elsa's 20 pence, she'll sing for you. Joan's 15, no singing. Catherine's 10, she bites. The women do not smile. Elsa, the one with a crooked nose and hopeful eyes, fidgets with her sleeve. Katrin crosses her arms and raises an eyebrow as if to say, "Try me." Fun fact, in many medieval cities, brothels were staffed in part by women who had no other legal means to survive, divorced, widowed, or orphaned. Some even had to register with city officials, their names inked in ledgers that historians still dig through today. Privacy? Not really an option. Your identity, like your virtue, was a matter of public record. And here you are, expected to choose from a group of women who likely haven't chosen anything in years. You point hesitantly at Joan. Not too expensive, not too intimidating. Margot nods, and Joan sighs. Not dramatically, more like someone agreeing to wash dishes. She beckons and walks off without a word, expecting you to follow. As you trail behind her, the hallway narrows. The air gets heavier. The walls are damp, not from cleaning, but from centuries of bad insulation and human breath. Joan leads you to a small room barely large enough to turn around in. A stained curtain hangs instead of a door. There's a bed, generously speaking, a wooden platform with some kind of straw-stuffed cushion that leaks when she sits on it. "Sit if you want," she mutters, not unkindly. "Just not on the edge. It splinters." You perch on the safer-looking corner and glance around. There's a chipped ceramic bowl on a crate, half full of water. A comb with 3 teeth. A cracked hand mirror. And against the wall, a cluster of dried herbs hung upside down. Someone tried. They really did. "So," she says after a moment. "What do you want?" You blink. She doesn't say it with flirtation or even curiosity, more like someone taking your sandwich order. You mutter something vague about talking, maybe just company. She shrugs. "That's fine." "Easier." Joan begins untying her hair, long and dark, streaked with something that might be ash or flour. "You don't seem the usual sort," she says. "Too quiet. Too clean." That last part surprises you. "Don't take it wrong," she adds. "It's nice. Smells like soap. Real soap, not that lye block from the apothecary." She leans in and sniffs your shoulder like a curious animal. "Lavender?" Her eyes flicker with the faintest amusement. "You'll scare the fleas away." It's the first laugh of the evening, and it dies quickly. There's a soft knocking sound, like a wooden spoon on a wall, followed by Margot's voice, "Half hour." Joan groans. Ignore her. She thinks time moves in coins. Historians still argue whether the average brothel worker in medieval times had any true agency or autonomy. Some accounts describe women organizing for better conditions, others read like horror stories, filled with exploitation, beatings, and worse. Your time with Joan, while not exactly romantic, feels like something between those extremes, a transaction, but one tinged with weary humanity. She tells you about her first week here. About the gentleman who paid in sheep cheese. About the friar who cried afterward. "They all want someone to see them," she says, plucking a flea from her hem and flicking it toward the floor. "Doesn't matter what they say when they come in. That's what they want." You nod, unsure how to respond. A quirky tidbit? Some medieval brothels had house musicians, minstrels who wandered from room to room, strumming lutes or viols to set the mood. Imagine your worst date, now add off-key singing and the occasional accidental burp. Outside the curtain, someone stumbles past, bumping into the wall. Muffled laughter follows. Then shouting. Then silence. Joan doesn't flinch. "Ignore it," she says. If they were dead, Margot would have screamed. You're starting to feel, not relaxed, Exactly, but lulled. The heat, the candle flicker, the dull throb of distant footsteps, it's enough to trick your brain into a shallow calm. Joan lies back on the straw bed and closes her eyes, arms crossed behind her head. She's done this so many times the ritual has lost all tension. But then she opens one eye and says, "Don't let Margot sell you the linen. She charges extra for that." You smile. A little. And then, without warning, the curtain snaps open again. It's Margot. "Time's up," she says. "Unless he's got more coin." Joan looks at you. You look at Margot. "And your pouch?" "Nowhere in sight." "Oh," Margot says, feigning surprise. "Did I not give that back?" "Silly me." You rise from the bed, too fast, and bang your knee on the frame. Joan winces in sympathy. Margot hands you your pouch, significantly lighter, and waves you toward the door. "Go on now. Can't loiter. This ain't a monastery." You step back into the hallway. The air feels colder now. Maybe it's the draft. Maybe it's you. You're back in the hallway again, clutching your now anemic coin pouch and wondering how things spiraled so fast. Margot's shadow disappears behind the curtain, already preparing the next transaction. And you? You've just learned that medieval customer service doesn't come with a satisfaction survey or a refund. You shuffle forward, trying not to make eye contact with anyone else in the corridor. But of course, that's when you round a corner and stumble into your next moral and bacterial conundrum. It's the choosing room, if you want to be generous about names. A slanted, smoky space with a warped table in the center and a long bench along the far wall. And seated on that bench, under a faded tapestry that might once have depicted a hunt but now mostly shows holes and wine stains, are 6 individuals arranged like a medieval buffet, clothed loosely, gazes fixed in every direction but yours. Here comes the second chance you didn't ask for. Margot's voice slithers up behind you again. "Didn't like Joan," she says, more amused than annoyed. "No worries. We cater to all tastes here." She gestures to the lineup with a sweeping hand, like a magician presenting the finale of her trick. "Pick your poison," she says, teeth flashing. It's not just women this time. A slender man with braided hair lounges at one end, blowing lazy rings of smoke toward the ceiling. Beside him, a woman with a milky eye toys with a dagger. Another has elaborate tattoos, likely homemade, and a boyish grin. There's even someone dressed in what appears to be a noblewoman's gown, though the 5 o'clock shadow beneath the rouge betrays the illusion. You hesitate. They don't look like they're trying to seduce you. They look tired. Or bored. Maybe both. But Margot's still watching. One of the workers, probably mid-30s, short-cropped hair, a scar running down their jawline, leans forward. "You're new." Their voice is low, confident. First-timers always take the longest. Like picking a coffin. That joke lands in your stomach like spoiled milk. Historically speaking, this diversity wasn't uncommon. While most brothel records focus on female workers, scholars have uncovered evidence, through taxation lists and court records, that male and non-binary sex workers existed in medieval Europe. In certain cities, like Florence or Barcelona, male brothels served an elite clientele, often with tacit approval from the church, so long as discretion reigned. Which it almost never did. Margot snorts. "Oh, don't look like that," she says to you, jabbing a finger in your direction. This place runs on variety. Some folks want a curtsy. Some want a knife at their throat. You'd be surprised how many want both. She walks along the lineup, tapping each person on the head like she's blessing them. They've all been scrubbed. Mostly. Pick one. And you do. Not because you're sure, but because standing there too long makes you look like a constable or a priest, and neither is welcome for very long. You gesture toward the one with the tattoos and the grin. They rise, stretch, and motion for you to follow. Come on, clean ears, they say, tone light but watchful. Let's get you out of the draft. They lead you up a rickety staircase that lists dangerously to the right. You duck instinctively as a beam droops low enough to kiss your forehead. The corridor above is narrower than before, lined with creaky doors and uneven floorboards that threaten to swallow your boots whole. You're ushered into a small room with a rafter that's just high enough to hang a shirt on, but not tall enough to stretch without hitting your head. Your chosen guide, whose name, you learn, is Rafe, plops down on the bed with a sigh. You look like you're about to be hanged, they say, grinning. Don't worry. That comes later. You sit gingerly on a stool. Rafe raises an eyebrow. Not planning to use the bed. You shrug. Just wanted to talk. Rafe blinks. Then laughs, genuinely. Oh, you're one of those. Been a while. You manage a weak smile. What kind? The ones who think they're rescuing someone, Rafe replies. Or maybe the ones who just need someone to listen to them breathe. It's not wrong. You notice a wooden box tucked under the bed frame. On top of it sits a bundle of dried leaves and a tiny clay figure shaped like a woman with exaggerated hips. For luck, Rafe says, following your gaze. She's from my mum's village. They used to keep her near the goats to help with birthing. I figured she might help here too. A quirky detail from actual history, brothel workers in medieval times sometimes practiced folk rituals or wore charms for protection, not just from violent clients, but from disease and misfortune. One account from 14th century Prague mentions women tying sprigs of yarrow around their ankles to keep the seed from taking root. Herbal contraceptives, real or imagined, were part of their trade knowledge. Rafe offers you a sip of wine from a wooden cup. You hesitate. It's safe, they say. I boiled the cup. You sip. It tastes like raisins and regret. A muffled crash sounds from downstairs, followed by an eruption of laughter and what might be an argument. Rafe doesn't move. That's the gambling table. Every night someone loses more than they meant to. Historians still argue whether brothels were tolerated out of necessity or exploited as a method of population control. Some cities placed them near jails and barracks, hoping to tame dangerous men. Others taxed them heavily and used the revenue to build churches. Contradictions were the norm. You glance at the bed again. Do you like it? You ask, instantly regretting the question. Rafe shrugs. I like food. I like warmth. I like waking up not dead. That's more than some get. Then they lean in, close enough that you can smell the rosemary oil in their hair. But if you're asking if I dreamed of this when I was little? No. I wanted to be a falconer. They laugh, a little sadly. Turns out birds don't pay. You both sit in silence for a moment, the candle sputtering between you, wax dripping in slow, lazy folds. Outside the window, voices echo in the alley, someone hawking eels, another shouting about firewood, the world still turning while yours has temporarily ground to a halt. You'll need to pick soon, Rafe says eventually. Talking's free, but the night isn't. You nod and rise, your limbs heavy, your thoughts heavier. You place a coin gently on the wooden stool and whisper, "Thank you." Rafe pockets it without looking. Come back if you want to talk about falcons. As you leave the room and descend the stairs, a wave of tiredness hits you. Not from exertion, but from the weight of everything unsaid, everything traded, and everything lost. You walk past the lineup again. No one notices you now. You chose your poison. And now it's settling in. You're starting to understand that nothing in here is what it pretends to be. The walls lean like they're drunk. The people smile like they're joking, but no one laughs. Even the smells are lying to you. One moment it's roses, the next it's dead fish and wet dog. Which brings you to your next revelation: there's no bathhouse. No washroom. No steaming tub with gentle bubbles and a sponge-wielding servant. You ask, naively, if there's a place to clean up. Margot cackles so loudly that a rat darts across the floor behind her, possibly offended. Bath, she says. What, you think this is Florence? You don't know whether that's sarcasm or a historical reference. You decide not to ask. She slaps a bundle into your hands. It's a handful of dried herbs wrapped in cloth, lavender, rosemary, and something earthy that might be thyme or maybe just dirt. Tuck it under your collar. Smells better than you'll end up smelling. She sniffs the air near your shoulder and winces. Well, at least you've got a head start. Here's a fun historical fact for your increasingly fragile peace of mind. Most medieval brothels didn't have proper washing facilities. There might be a basin of water in the corner, if you were lucky. But soap was expensive, and hot water even more so. Instead, workers and patrons alike relied on scented sachets, powders, and sometimes just rubbing alcohol or vinegar onto their skin. It masked the odor, not that it fooled anyone. Your sachet smells lovely, though. For about 5 minutes. Then it's just cloying. Like you've been dipped in the perfume section of a medieval apothecary and rolled in sweat. You pass by a woman scrubbing a wall with a brush that's more bristle than handle. She looks up, shrugs, and says, "It's not coming out." It never does. You don't ask what it is. You've learned something, at least. In one corner of the main room, someone's attempting to freshen things up. A little bowl of burning herbs sits on a shelf, smoke curling toward the ceiling. Frankincense, someone mutters nearby. Or horse dung. Hard to tell from here. The smoke helps a little, but mostly it just gives the room a hazy, temple of regret feel. You wander a bit, trying not to look like you're wandering. A threadbare tapestry flaps slightly in a draught. You part it like a curtain and find yourself in what might be a dressing room. Or maybe a storeroom. Or a storage closet someone's pretending is a dressing room. There are gowns hung on pegs, rich colors, once. Deep reds, emerald greens. Now they're dull, patched, stiff with time and who knows what. One has a rip right down the side that's been stitched up with string. Another still has a brooch pinned to the collar. A velvet choker lies on a stool next to a dented tin mirror. You glance at yourself. The lighting isn't kind. You look pale, a little sunken, like you've been living underground. Which, in a sense, you kind of have for the past few hours. That's when you hear the humming. Soft, tuneless, drifting through the wall. You follow the sound, slipping past a crooked door frame and into a small alcove, where a girl no older than 15, maybe younger, is brushing her hair with slow, careful strokes. Her dress is simple linen, cleaner than most. Her eyes catch yours in the mirror. "You're not supposed to be in here," she says. You apologize. She shrugs. Doesn't matter. No one listens to the rules anyway. She returns to brushing, not looking back at you again. You want to ask her something, anything, but you don't know where to start. Instead, you step backward, out of the room, letting the tapestry fall back into place. A quirky tidbit? Some medieval brothels actually employed laundresses or attendants whose job was to freshen up clothes and linens between clients. These women worked in the shadows of the profession, less visible, but no less vulnerable. There are court records from 15th century France detailing laundresses brought up on charges just for being associated with the business. As you walk, you begin to notice something crawling on your wrist. You freeze. Tiny legs. Thin. Fast. You swipe it off, heart pounding. Then another. On your collar. You yank off the sachet Margot gave you and sniff it again. Yep, still vaguely comforting, but it's not helping. You duck into the hallway and scratch the back of your neck furiously. Is it in your hair? Your shirt? One of the girls passing by laughs. First time. Who? You look at her, startled. The lice, she says, pointing casually. Takes a few hours to notice. Don't worry. They like clean scalps. You suppress a shudder. No bath. No soap. Just perfumed cloth and medieval mites. Historians still argue whether people in the Middle Ages really were as dirty as the stereotypes suggest. Some claim folks bathed regularly, at least when bathhouses were open and plague wasn't threatening to boil everyone's lymph nodes. Others argue that hygiene was mostly performative, scented oils, herbal sachets, a quick splash of rosewater behind the ears. Real cleaning? Optional. You find a bench near the corner and sit. Your head itches. Your feet hurt. And someone nearby has just vomited into a pot. You're starting to feel acclimated, which is terrifying. And then someone hands you a comb. Here, the woman says, boil it if you can. Or just don't share it. You take it, confused, until you realize it's your initiation gift. Not a sword or a goblet, but a louse comb. Ornamental in its own way, made of wood, with a carved bird on the end. Possibly cursed. Probably not. In the background, someone starts singing in Latin. Badly. You scratch your scalp again and sigh. One night. You promised yourself just one night. And you're already crawling. You're still holding that wooden lice comb like it's a ceremonial relic when someone offers you a drink. Wine, says the man, pushing a chipped ceramic cup toward your hand. He's sitting cross-legged on the floor, cheeks flushed, eyes bright in that overly cheerful way that only means trouble. He's wearing mismatched hose, a belt with no buckle, and a tunic that smells faintly of old cheese and damp dog. You hesitate. Maybe it's not wine. Maybe it's potion adjacent. It's good, he says, misreading your expression. Aged. Or at least it's been sitting for a while. You accept the cup. The liquid inside is dark, almost black. It clings to the rim like syrup. You take a cautious sip. Instant regret. It's bitter. Sharp. With a metallic aftertaste like a mouthful of old pennies soaked in vinegar. You try not to wince, but your face betrays you. He laughs. Told you it was good. Then he snatches the cup back and downs the rest like he's chasing a demon out of his chest. That's when you realize something crucial. No one in here is drinking actual wine. Historically, wine in medieval brothels was often watered down, or worse, stretched with vinegar or lead-laced syrups to mimic the tang of aging. That sweet afterbite you noticed? Quite possibly a splash of sapa, a boiled grape syrup often sweetened with lead acetate. And yes, it was slowly poisoning people. But it did taste nice, apparently. You glance at your empty cup. Congratulations. You've just joined the Lead Lovers Club. A woman with curly, straw-colored hair flops onto the bench beside you. She's holding a different kind of drink, frothy, thick, and smelling faintly like smoked plums. Ale, she offers. You decline. Your stomach is already staging a quiet protest. Suit yourself, she says, and drinks deep. Then she wipes her mouth on her sleeve and adds, careful though. The stuff they brew in the cellar sometimes makes you blind. You stare. Temporarily, she says with a grin. Usually. A quirky tidbit, some brothels had attached breweries. Not because the madams fancied themselves craft beer entrepreneurs, but because ale was safer to drink than water. Water, of course, was the dark lottery of medieval refreshment, teeming with bacteria, parasites, and who knows what. Fermentation, at least, killed a few things. Not lead, though. Sorry. You thank her for the warning and stand to leave, but the room tilts slightly. Not enough to panic, just enough to suggest you've crossed a chemical threshold. You grip a support beam and blink hard. Your tongue feels oddly furry. The bench across from you is suddenly crowded, 3 men playing a dice game involving actual bones and something that might be chicken feet. One of them rolls a double 6 and hoots like he's just been knighted. Margot walks by with a pitcher and a cloth that looks like it used to be a curtain. We refill every hour, she says, whether you ask or not. You think she's joking. You hope. You wander back into the main hall, wobbling slightly. The air smells like spilled ale, candle wax, and roasted chestnuts, though there are definitely no chestnuts. Your guess is someone knocked over a lamp. You pass a table where 2 women are arm wrestling. One has a fresh bruise on her temple and is grinning with all the teeth she has left. The other is sweating profusely and shouting insults in what might be Dutch. And that's when you see the pitcher. It's sitting unattended near the hearth. Ceramic, wide-mouthed, still steaming faintly. You reach for it, hoping for tea, or maybe soup. Anything to wash the taste of vinegar wine from your mouth. You pour a little into a wooden cup and take a sip. It's thin, earthy, mushy in texture. You swallow anyway, out of hope. You make it 2 full mouthfuls before someone taps your shoulder. That's for the pig, says a voice behind you. You freeze. The pig? A man with a red beard and one eye nods toward the shadows near the fireplace. You look. There, sleeping in a crate stuffed with rags, is indeed a pig. Small, pink, surprisingly clean-looking. It snorts in its sleep. You lower the cup slowly. The man shrugs. Better than the stuff they feed us. Historians still argue whether brothel wine was intentionally adulterated to dull the senses or simply a result of poor storage and cheaper ingredients. Some claim madams kept a good vintage in the back for wealthier clients. Others argue no one in the business could afford good wine at all, except the clergy, of course, who were known to frequent such places with ironic consistency. You sit again, this time near the fireplace, far from the pig stew. Someone hands you another cup before you can protest. This one tastes like boiled bark. Possibly is boiled bark. You don't ask. You notice now that there's a rhythm to the room, cups clinking, people laughing, someone groaning in a far-off hallway. An old woman sweeping between tables with a broom that has almost no bristles left. A lute player tuning his instrument slowly, painfully, like he's just learning how strings work. He begins to play. It's ambitious. At one point, he tries to sing, but it comes out as a yodel crossed with a belch. No one seems to mind. One of the gamblers throws him a coin. The lute player nods solemnly and drops the coin into his boot. You suspect that's his bank. A woman nearby whispers, "He's been here 10 years. Doesn't play any better, but we're used to him." You ask, "Why is he always drunk?" She looks at you like you just asked why water is wet. "Have you looked around?" she says. You can't argue with that. You sip again, because you're either adjusting or your taste buds have resigned. The air is thick with stories, half-heard laughter, and things you'd rather not identify. And it hits you again, this is what people called entertainment. No theatre. No pageants. No feasts. Just drink, dice, music, and the slow unraveling of your common sense. You lean back, staring at the wooden beams above, which now seem to be moving slightly. You're either getting used to the place, or the lead is kicking in. Your cup's empty again. You're not sure when you finished it. Maybe 5 minutes ago. Maybe an hour. Time is leaking, somehow, stretching in all directions like the warp beams above your head. You've started to sway with the rhythm of the room, a slow, off-key lullaby of dice clatters, lute twangs, and the distant gurgle of something you deeply hope isn't plumbing. Margot is back. Always. She glides past your bench, dropping a warm hand on your shoulder for just a second, friendly, if your definition of friendly includes a faint smell of lanolin and someone checking for valuables. Enjoying yourself, she purrs, but doesn't wait for the answer. Instead, she's moving toward the curtain-lined hallway again, and you watch her vanish like a cat into a fog bank. That woman can smell coin from 3 rooms away. Even your empty pouch is probably whimpering in her presence. The room shifts again, a few chairs scraping along the uneven floor as new patrons stumble in. A pair of them, city men, maybe apprentices or failed poets, flop down near the hearth and shout for entertainment. Cue the musician, who promptly breaks a string. Everyone groans in mild, affectionate agony. Someone claps anyway. You're pretty sure irony was invented in places like this. You stretch, carefully. Every joint cracks. The cushion beneath you feels suspiciously damp now. You check your sleeve. The itching's back. Yep. Still alive, still crawling. You glance toward the hallway, debating a change of scenery. Anywhere has to be better than the pig and lead tasting room. You push to your feet and begin to walk. The corridor's darker than before. Someone's extinguished half the candles, or maybe they've just burned out on their own, like dreams. You pass the thin wooden partitions again, fabric draped over doorways, the faint glow of candlelight bleeding out at the edges. Laughter in one. Muffled sobs in another. No doors, just curtains. Privacy was never part of the contract. And then you notice something strange. A rhythm. Not music. Not footsteps. Not even moaning. It's tapping. Steady. Deliberate. Tap. 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 You follow it. Slowly. Against your better judgment, which, to be fair, checked out somewhere around the second cup of medieval vinegar wine. The noise leads you to a larger room. Less brothel, more, what, common area? Lounge? Dungeon-adjacent social zone? There's a fire here, a real one, flickering in a wide stone hearth. Above it hangs a dried herb bundle tied with red thread, wormwood, maybe, or tansy. Witchy stuff. Protection, or decoration. Or both. A woman sits in the corner, carving something into a piece of wood. Her hands move quickly, the blade flashing in the firelight. That's the tapping sound. She doesn't look up when you enter. You step closer. Not too close. She's carving what looks like a chess piece, though the figure's definitely wearing a crown and holding something you can't identify. An eel? A snake? A child? Want one, she says without looking. You don't answer fast enough. Didn't think so, she mutters, and keeps carving. You ask what the figures are for. She shrugs. Protection. Or toys. Depends who's buying. Then she does look up. Her eyes are clear. Sober. Not a whiff of drink or smoke around her. It's unsettling. I watch, she says. That's my job. Watch, remember. And sometimes, warn. Oh no. You've wandered into the brothel oracle. Every establishment has one, if not in title then in function. The older worker who doesn't serve clients anymore but seems to know everything. Secrets. Schedules. Weak beams. Loose floorboards. Who's got the pox and who's got the sheriff's ear? She leans back and says, "You've got the face of someone who thought this would be sexy." You cough, suddenly very interested in your shoes. She continues, "Don't worry. Most of you do. Until you get in. Then the wine kicks in, the fleas start biting, and you realize what you paid for wasn't pleasure, it was forgetting. You look up. Whatever you were running from. Still there, she says. Only now it smells like spoiled beef and is probably contagious. A quirky historical detail, in certain brothels, especially in port cities, there were unofficial keepers of stories. Often ex-workers, these women knew who came and went, who paid on time, who beat their companions, and which sailors never returned from sea. Some even kept hidden ledgers, tiny archives of sin and survival. She offers you the carved piece she's been working on. For luck, she says. You take it, feeling the smoothness of the wood, the warmth from her hands. It's not a figure you recognize. Maybe a goddess. Maybe just someone who didn't survive the night. You leave her room and find yourself in a narrower hallway. This one isn't for guests. The walls are lined with tools. Brushes, buckets, bundles of herbs, needles, bone combs. You're in the backstage area now. The machinery that keeps this dream stuttering along. A young boy, maybe 10, passes you with a slop bucket. He nods, doesn't speak. You step aside to let him through. His shirt has no sleeves. His feet are bare. And still he walks like he owns the place. Runner, someone says behind you. He fetches things. Messages. Herbs. Wine. Water, when there is any. Water. That reminds you. You still haven't washed your hands. You still haven't seen a single bar of soap. You consider asking someone where the washroom is again, but stop yourself. You already know the answer. Instead, you find a bench, one not soaked through, and sit. The carved figure still rests in your palm. You breathe. Not deeply. Not here. But enough. And from somewhere nearby, you hear it again. Tap. 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 The sound of someone trying to carve order out of chaos. You wake up itching. Not metaphorically, not poetically, physically. A vicious tickle works its way from your shoulder down your spine, and you lurch upright, clawing at your tunic like you're about to shed your skin. There's straw in your hair, drool on your sleeve, and a damp patch under your thigh that you're absolutely not investigating. You're back in the main hall, or maybe you never left. At some point, you must have nodded off on this questionably upholstered bench. Around you, the room is quieter now. The drinking has tapered to muttering. Dice clatter more slowly. The lute player has apparently passed out mid-strum, the final chord of his performance stretched across 2 drunken snores. And the itch isn't going away. You scratch behind your ear, your neck, your lower back. Every nerve feels electric. like tiny legs are holding a dance contest just beneath your skin. A passing worker gives you a sympathetic glance. Lice, she says, yawning. Or mites. Hard to tell. Could be fleas too. She scratches her own elbow absent-mindedly. You ask where you might, deal with this. She laughs. Oh honey, she says, you're in it. No out. Fun fact, lice weren't just common in medieval brothels, they were standard. Everyone had them. Aristocrats wore powdered wigs partly to mask the infestation. Workers here, though? No wigs. No distractions. You get the full, six-legged welcome package. Plus fleas. Oh, and body mites, which are basically microscopic squatters in your armpits. Congratulations. Someone hands you a pot of something. Put this behind your ears, says a voice behind you. It helps. You look down. The mixture is thick and greyish. Smells like mint, sulfur, and regret. You smear it on. It burns a little. That's probably good. Probably. You pass the time watching the sleepers. One woman lies under a table, curled like a cat. Another is slumped against the fireplace, her mouth open slightly, eyes fluttering like she's arguing with ghosts in her dream. A man across the room has his feet propped on a crate and his arms crossed, gently snoring while holding a half-eaten pastry. It's peaceful. In a way. Then someone screams. The kind of scream that starts in the gut and claws its way out like a medieval alarm bell. Everyone jolts. A chair topples. Someone curses. You whip around, heart racing. From behind a curtain down the hall, a woman bursts out, hair wild, dress torn, eyes wide as coins. She stumbles forward, nearly collapsing, followed seconds later by Margot and a tall man in a long green coat. No refunds. Margot shouts, waving a hand. You signed the terms. The man says nothing. He adjusts his gloves, smooths his coat, and walks out the door like he's just finished a polite conversation. The woman sobs, trembling, as Margot ushers her toward the stairs. No one else moves. No one comments. This is part of it. And then it hits you, no guards. No safety net. No lock on any curtain. You're in a place where nothing is truly private and everything is permitted if you pay enough. Historians still argue whether brothel violence was systemic or incidental. Some claim madams enforce strict rules for client behavior. Others point to records of assaults, deaths, and disappearances of both workers and patrons that were never investigated. One London brothel ledger from 1388 includes the note "Valis, vanished after third night." No complaint filed. You try to return to your corner, to your lice, to your miserable cushion. But now your skin crawls for another reason. That scream wasn't just noise. It was a flare, a warning. And no one cared. Except maybe one person. A young woman, maybe 17, moves from the shadows with a cloth in hand. She finds the crying girl, kneels beside her, and whispers something. Gently, she begins dabbing at the girl's face. No one asks her to. No one notices. You make a mental note of her, red scarf, bare feet, kindness in a place that runs on currency. Quirky side note? Some brothels employed what were called quiet sisters or soft hands, unofficial caretakers who tended wounds, calmed panic, and offered whispered comfort. Not always out of saintliness, but because they knew it might be them tomorrow. Survival here depended on more than charm, it required strange, sudden tenderness. You touch the wooden figurine in your pocket. Still there. Somehow not crawling. The fire crackles. The screams fade. Someone nearby begins humming. And the itch returns. You stand abruptly and stomp toward the curtained hallway again, this time with more resolve. You want something. Water. Soap. A brick wall to scrub against. Anything. The hallway stretches like a dream. You find yourself in front of another room, larger, better lit. A mirror hangs on the wall. You blink at your reflection. Your scalp looks like it's hosting a picnic. You glance around. No one's coming to help you. So you do what any self-respecting time traveler would do. You strip off your tunic, dunk it into the grimy bucket in the corner, and scrub yourself with a brush that smells like fermented rosemary. It's not effective, but it feels like a protest. You towel off with what might be a curtain. Pull your tunic back on damp and itchy. Then return to the main room, where life has resumed its usual pace. Someone is singing again. Someone is crying. Someone is vomiting discreetly into a jug. You sit down. You are cleanish. And exhausted. Your scalp still itches. But at least now you know the lace on these gowns? Not for beauty. They're trying to trap the bugs before they get to the scalp. And you're too late. There's something primal about hearing other people through thin walls. Something that tugs at your sense of privacy, shatters it, really. Because now, sitting in a rickety wooden chair just outside the guest rooms, you hear everything. Every creak of the bed frames. Every sigh, moan, barked instruction. A woman hiccuping through a forced laugh. A man groaning like he's lifting barrels, not participating in pleasure. The occasional slap of skin on skin, less rhythmic, more transactional. Like meat hitting a butcher's block. You sit there, trying very hard not to listen, which of course means you hear more. One of the rooms emits a long, wailing cough between each pause in conversation. You wonder if it's the same Thalys who had the cough earlier, the one Margot warned against. A door opens and shuts, and a man walks out adjusting his hose, whistling something tuneless and off-key. He doesn't notice you. Your background. A chair. A stain on the air. You're learning the rhythm now. About 10 minutes per customer. 15 if he's sentimental. Or stingy. A girl walks by balancing a tray with a single cup on it. He wants wine with poetry, she mutters. Of course he does. She stops when she sees you. You waiting for someone. Her voice is kind, but guarded. You shake your head. She nods and walks on. The cup rattles as she moves. You try to lean your head back against the wall, but it's damp. You straighten again. Suddenly, the curtain across from you twitches. A young boy, 12, maybe 13, sticks his head out and glares at you. His cheeks are flushed, and there's an odd sharpness in his gaze, like he's already seen too much for his size. You listening? He asks. You blink, surprised. No. He snorts. Liar. Then he disappears back inside. Historically, brothels didn't operate in silence. Privacy was a luxury. In many cases, workers and clients performed within earshot of others. Thin walls, if any. Some even shared space, simultaneous activity, separated only by modesty curtains or sheets strung across ropes. It's part of why sex in the Middle Ages was often more about function than fantasy. You stand and start moving again, your limbs stiff. Behind one door, you hear someone weeping softly. Not loud. Not performative. Just tired. Across the hall, laughter erupts, boisterous, shrill, and echoing off the cracked plaster like some horrible tavern echo. A man bursts out, half-dressed, clearly drunk. "Best 5 pence I ever spent," he shouts to no one. Then he stumbles, vomits against the wall, and keeps walking. No one responds. No one helps. There's no concern here for what happens once a curtain falls back into place. You get the sense that the people behind them disappear, not physically, but in all the ways that matter. They become tasks, experiences, paydays. Never names. You press forward, away from the noise. Deeper into the building. You stumble upon what you think is a recovery room. 2 mattresses, side by side, no sheets. One's occupied. A girl lies there, eyes closed, face pale. She's breathing, but shallowly. Her hand twitches now and then, clutching at her own tunic. No one sits beside her. A basin of water sits on the floor nearby. The water is pink. You don't ask why. Beside it, a small table with a half-eaten hunk of bread and a candle that's burned low enough to melt into the table itself. A quirky tidbit for your growing nightmare journal: some brothels actually had sick rooms. Not out of compassion, but practicality. A sick worker couldn't entertain clients and might infect others. So they were isolated, not treated, not truly cared for, just set aside. Like bad fruit in a market stall, waiting to either recover or be discarded. You back away slowly, quietly. You round a corner and find another woman with her back to you, whispering a prayer into cupped hands. The words are too soft to catch, but the rhythm is unmistakable, an Ave Maria or something close. You wait. She finishes, straightens, turns. You expect surprise. She gives you none. "Wrong room," she asks. You nod. "Then go," she says, but not unkindly. Just firmly. You do. Historians still argue whether religion and brothels were enemies or bedfellows. Some brothels were, ironically, church-owned. Not officially, of course, but leased property, taxed revenue, and clerical silence told a different story. The contradiction was just part of life. Sin could be profitable. Prayer, part of the cycle. Back in the corridor, the sounds continue. Now they've started to blend together. Crying and laughing. Groaning and silence. You feel detached from it all, floating just above, watching through smeared glass. And then, music again. Not the lute this time. A humming. Low, lilting, like a lullaby from a language you don't know. You follow it down the hallway until it fades at a corner. You pause, half expecting it to start again. But it doesn't. Instead, you hear 2 women whispering. "He's not coming back, is he?" "No. That's the 3rd this week." "Don't think they're dying. Think they're leaving." A pause. "You ever thought about it?" "I think about it every day." You step back before they notice you. You return to the main hallway. You find a bench. You sit. You don't scratch. You don't drink. You just listen. And that's how you survive the rest of the hour, not by joining in, not by fleeing, but by letting the place sink in like a fever. It takes you. It makes you still. It teaches you that survival here isn't about being strong. It's about being silent. Unforgettable. So there you are, sitting quietly, trying not to draw attention, trying even harder not to exist. It's almost working, too, until a door near the back of the brothel creaks open and out stumbles what can only be described as a human-shaped lute string of chaos. He's wrapped in a velvet tunic 3 sizes too big, his stockings mismatched, and his hat, a tall felt thing with a crooked feather, is listing like a sinking ship. One eye is painted with coal, the other squinting suspiciously at a wine jug he's gripping like a scepter. "Music," he announces, loud enough to draw groans. Did someone request excellence? No one answers. A dog barks from somewhere, possibly at him. Possibly in agreement. He plucks a string on his lute. It's wildly out of tune. Another string snaps immediately, curling upward like it's trying to escape. He doesn't care. Or notice. This next song, he slurs, is for you. He points vaguely in your direction, but his finger zigzags past 3 different people. You're not sure if it's a dedication or a hex. Welcome to the nightly entertainment. In the Middle Ages, it wasn't uncommon for brothels, especially ones near city centers or tavern districts, to employ wandering musicians. They were part ambience, part distraction, part noise buffer for the activities echoing through the halls. You might call it a medieval playlist, only every track is live and none of them are good. He begins to play. It's bold. Rhythmic in a clumsy sort of way, like someone trying to recreate a love song using only elbows. The lyrics? Something about a miller's daughter, a goose feather, and betrayal involving jam. You lose the thread quickly. So does he. He stops midway through a verse and drinks deeply from his jug. Encore, he asks no one. No, someone mutters. Encore it is. The crowd, if you can call it that, mostly ignores him. A few workers lean against the wall, arms crossed, trading glances that say he's back again. One of them rolls their eyes so hard you hear it. You try to sneak off, but he notices. "You there," he bellows. With the expression. "Great." He stumbles toward you. Got a request? Ballad? Drinking song? War epic? He raises a hand dramatically. Or shall I compose your story? You shake your head. But he's already tuning a new string that came out of his boot somehow. Ah, a shy hero. Silent. Brooding. It's always the quiet ones with lice. You decide to accept this fate. After all, he's not the worst part of the night. Not even the most confusing. He plucks a few discordant notes and launches into something approximating melody. This one is about a knight who loses his sword, finds love, and then accidentally marries a goat. A tale as old as time. A fringe fact? There's a preserved 14th century tavern song, discovered scribbled in the margin of a legal document, that tells a similar absurd story. A peasant falls into a latrine, climbs out, and demands to be declared king of the pigs. The scribe even added musical notation. And historians still argue whether it was meant to be ironic or instructional. Meanwhile, our resident bard hits a particularly sour note and winces. "That one's cursed," he says. "No one play the D minor in here. Not since Martha died." You don't ask who Martha was. The lute player collapses onto a bench beside you, breathing like he's just climbed a mountain. He wipes sweat from his brow with his sleeve, which might be velvet or might be waxed pigskin. Hard to tell in this lighting. "Name's Tilo," he mutters. Former court musician. Technically. Was employed by a bishop, he continues, until I wrote a song about his, let's say, generous waistline. Didn't appreciate the rhyme with oink. He sighs. Now I work freelance. Artistic freedom. Also, the rats here don't judge. Tilo reaches into his tunic and pulls out a wrinkled piece of parchment. Want to see my new masterpiece? You nod, more out of pity than interest. He hands it over. It's a ballad, titled The Baker's Wife and the Unexpected Ferret. It's inventive. You read 3 lines before giving it back. He beams like you've handed him a royal commendation. You ask how long he's been here. Since yesterday, he says. Or maybe last week. I keep waking up in the same spot, so I figure this is home now. He shrugs. Better than sleeping in a dung cart. Slightly. Another song begins, slower this time, almost haunting. A lullaby twisted by his breathless delivery. Words catch in his throat, dissolve halfway through a verse. Still, the room grows a little quieter. Heads turn, not because he's good, but because he's trying. There's a kind of respect in that. Even the brothel has quiet moments. Brief pauses where the groaning, laughter, and muffled arguments subside. Where you feel a flicker of something almost human. Tilo finishes. That one, he says softly, was for the girl with the cough. No one claps. No one needs to. He bows anyway. Then slumps back and starts tuning the same broken string again. You realize he might be the most sincere person here. You thank him. He raises his cup in response. You rise to your feet again, not sure where you're going. Anywhere. Nowhere. You just need motion. As you step into the hallway once more, Tilo calls after you. Remember, he says, everyone's got a song. It's just some are shouted, and some are whispered into filthy straw. You don't respond. But the phrase follows you down the corridor, soft as a fading note. You follow a corridor without knowing why. Just moving, just breathing. The music behind you fades, replaced by the constant low murmur of voices and shuffling feet. The brothel never truly quiets, only dips into softer madness, like a sleeping dog still twitching in its dreams. The hallway bends slightly to the left, and you find yourself in a space unlike the others. Narrower. Darker. No windows. No singing. And the air heavier. More humid. As if you've entered a body, not a building. The walls press close, and the floorboards creak like they know your weight. A soft voice calls out. You following me? You freeze. The red-scarved girl from earlier steps out of a room just ahead. Same bare feet. Same calm eyes. She's holding a small cloth bundle and a tiny, chipped cup of something that smells faintly like boiled carrots. I thought you were a collector, she says, relaxing. Or one of those boys who likes to watch. You assure her you're neither. She nods slowly. That's good, she says, as though she'd have handled it either way. She's young, maybe 16, but there's a weight to her, like she's already lived 3 lives and filed them away alphabetically. You want something, she asks. Not flirtatious. Just direct. You hesitate. Not like that, she says, reading your silence. Water? Bandage? Something to forget. It's the first time someone's asked you that without expectation attached. You realize you're thirsty. And your neck still itches. And your legs are cramping from that horrible bench. She disappears into the room behind her, returns with a tin cup of cool water, and hands it to you. You sip it cautiously. It's clean. Not cold. Not flavored. But it doesn't burn, and there's no sediment floating in it. That makes it miraculous. Rain barrel, she says, sitting on the floor beside you. I keep one under the gutter out back. Boil it over the hearth when I can. You look at her in awe. She shrugs. Most people forget how to care for themselves once they live here. Or they stop trying. She doesn't introduce herself, so you don't ask her name. You don't need it. She's become the brothel's one quiet mercy. The ghost of what might have been kindness. Not all of us are here by debt, she adds. Some just had nowhere better. You live long enough in corners, you start building your own. You ask her how long she's been here. Since I was 12. That lands like a stone in your chest. Margot's not the worst, she adds quickly. I've seen worse. Plenty of places wouldn't have let me stop working after I turned 13. She unwraps her cloth bundle, our herbs, dried petals, tiny bottles of chalky powders. I do healing. A little. She points to a jar. Yarrow, for bleeding. Pennyroyal, for cramping. Tansy, if you really want to gamble. She doesn't explain that last one. You already know what it means. Here's your historical fact: herbal contraceptives were common among medieval sex workers. They weren't effective by modern standards, but they offered some measure of control. Pennyroyal tea was infamous, sometimes fatal. Tansy, rue, and silphium, if you could get it, were used despite painful side effects. Knowledge of plants often passed from woman to woman, in whispers, in code. She repacks the bundle with care and ties the cloth tight with a leather thong. I sell to the others. Sometimes I give it for free. Depends on the night. There's a long pause. You've lasted longer than I thought, she says. You glance up. Most men don't make it past the first hour. They think they're ready. They think they're different. Some try to save us. Some try to fight. Most just cry in the alley and pretend it never happened. You ask her what she thinks you are. She grins, the faintest curl at one side of her mouth. Too early to tell. A noise breaks the silence, a thump, a muffled groan. She's up in a flash, gathering her things. That's Alice again, she mutters. She didn't take the yarrow. Of course. You follow her without meaning to, caught in her orbit. Down the hall, into a low room that smells like iron and mold. Alice lies curled on a bed, knees drawn to her chest, face streaked with sweat. A worker is already there, holding a cloth to Alice's brow and whispering prayers. The red-scarved girl moves in like she's done it 100 times, uncorking bottles, grinding herbs with a mortar, applying paste to skin gone pale and waxy. You step back. Useless. Hold the basin, she says. You obey. Alice vomits into it seconds later. You don't flinch. You're past that now. Historians still argue whether brothel workers formed their own internal support networks or operated under strict hierarchies enforced by madams and enforcers. Letters from the period suggest a mixture. Some brothels were cages, others unexpected sisterhoods. It depended on who ran the place, and who had the courage to defy silence. After the worst of it, Alice slips into a shivering sleep. You help carry the basin outside to the refuse pile. It smells exactly like you'd expect. You return to the hallway, where the red-scarved girl rinses her hands in another of her boiled water cups. You okay? She asks, drying them. You nod. Good, she says. Because you still look too clean. She presses a small bunch of dried rosemary into your hand. Keep it in your pocket. Might keep the lice off. Or at least confuse them. You thank her. She steps back into the dark and is gone. You look down at the rosemary. Tiny leaves. Simple. Sharp. You close your hand around it. And for the first time all night, you feel like maybe, just maybe, you've stopped unraveling. You're trying to decide whether to sit down, lie down, or just collapse when the front door slams open with a gust of cool night air and the kind of boots-on-wood thud that makes everyone freeze. 3 men step into the brothel. Not clients, officials. You don't need their crests to know it. Their coats are too fine, their eyes too narrow, and their hands rest just a little too confidently on their belts. The one in the middle wears a short sword with a polished pommel. He's not trying to hide it. Margot is already striding toward them, her smile as wide and false as a minstrel's promise. "Evening, gentlemen," she says. "Lovely night for an audit, is it?" "Tax collection," the tallest man replies. "Quarter day." You know the rules. Margot sighs, theatrical. Always on the best nights. She pulls a ring of iron keys from her sash and leads them toward the back room, the one with the heavy door you haven't seen open before. The officials follow without acknowledging anyone else. And just like that, the whole room exhales again, except now it's changed. The air is tighter, more alert. Everyone's movements grow small and controlled. Even the ever-drunk Tilo picks up his lute and pretends to tune it. The dice game in the corner stops mid-toss. You're not sure why. Until someone whispers next to you, "Hide your coins." You blink. Why? The voice, belonging to a gaunt, sunken-eyed man you hadn't noticed, leans closer. Because if they say you owe more than you've paid, Margot adds it to your tab. Or takes your boots. You instinctively feel for your pouch. Still there. Still mostly empty. You tuck it deeper into your tunic and sit straighter. A fun little historical reality? Medieval tax collection was often enforced with little oversight and lots of improvisation. Brothels were gold mines, constantly flowing traffic, cash on hand, and no way to hide inventory. Officials would swing by not just to count coins, but to sample the goods in lieu of payment. That's not exaggeration, that's documented. You glance toward the back room. The door is still shut. And then you hear raised voices. Not shouting, but tense. Words clipped at the ends. Margot's voice sharp, then soft, then sharp again. Already paid last month. You paid less than was owed. I fed the constable for 3 nights. Not our concern. You wonder if this is the moment the whole place comes apart. But it doesn't. The door opens. The officials reappear. One of them carries a small ledger. The man with the sword pockets a handful of coins. None of them speak. They leave the same way they came, silent, firm, certain of their authority. Margot follows them to the door and watches as they disappear into the night. Then she shuts it quietly and says, to no one in particular, "Raise the prices." A quiet groan ripples through the room. "Not my fault," she adds, hands raised. "Talk to the king." But everyone knows no one's talking to the king. And even if they could, the king wouldn't answer. Quirky fringe detail, some brothels were required to pay what was known as leisure tax or sin tithe. The money allegedly went toward public works, like bridge repair or candles for churches. More often than not, it went straight into the pockets of whoever showed up first with a sword and a sense of entitlement. You notice that a few girls have vanished. Slipped out quietly before the officials arrived. Others now return, re-emerging from side rooms and corners, adjusting skirts and reapplying powder to dull their expression. The red-scarfed girl is among them. She doesn't look at you. Just walks past with her head down and her jaw tight. "Raise the prices," someone mutters again. "And yet we still get 1 crust of bread." Margot claps her hands once, loud enough to jolt the air. Back to work. No sense mourning what you never had. People scatter. You sit there, feeling the cold spot where your back touched the wall. Then a soft shape flops down beside you. It's Tilo again. Ah, he sighs, revenue inspection. Always good for the mood. You ask if it happens often. Depends, he says. On how much Margot owes. On whether the bishop needs a new chair. On the season. You know, the usual. He scratches his beard. One winter, they took every bottle of wine and all the candles. Said it was for the war effort. We drank boiled pear skins and sang by firelight for a month. You ask how they survived. We didn't, he says. We just didn't die. That's different. The room feels heavier than before. Like the tax men left a stain behind that no amount of yarrow or rosemary can scrub out. Margot walks past you again. She doesn't make eye contact. She's muttering to herself and adjusting the books in her arm, an actual leather ledger, the kind with tiny Latin notations and tally marks that look like prison scratches. You lean your head back, forgetting that the wall is damp. Again. And just as your eyes close, the lute strikes up a new tune. Bright. Too bright. Come now, friends, Tilo says, let us lift our spirits with a tale of mistaken identity and moderately priced cheese. You smile despite yourself. Because what else is there? You've just witnessed civic authority at its most casual and corrupt. You've seen money change hands in silence and debts created without logic. You've seen a building adjust itself like a living thing to survive one more night. You haven't laughed. You haven't cried. But you're still here. And so is the wine. You're just starting to feel that familiar lull, that strange, foggy exhaustion that settles between your ears like damp wool when the door opens again. But this time, no thudding boots. No drunken shouts or breathless apologies. Just soft footsteps, calculated, deliberate. A figure glides through the entryway in full-length robes of rich, ink-black cloth. Not dusty wool or patched velvet, this is real silk. The kind that hisses when it moves. A heavy hood shadows the figure's face, but you catch the glint of a polished crucifix hanging from a silver chain. A nun? No. Not with that posture. That confidence. Nuns shuffle. This person walks like they own the floor. And the floor knows it. Heads lift as if on strings. Even Margot straightens, suddenly alert. Back room, the figure says. The voice? Low. Measured. Could be a man. Could be a woman. Definitely not someone you want to ignore. Margot doesn't. She gives the faintest bow, not mockery, not fear, but something like weary respect. Of course, she says, and gestures down the hall with a crooked finger. The figure doesn't look left or right. Just moves toward the private rooms. You blink. Is that a nun? You whisper to Tilo, who's frowning deeply, mid-lyric. Depends on your definition, he murmurs. And your denomination. He sets his lute down, very gently, like it suddenly weighs 100 pounds. Some say that one's a defrocked abbess from Dijon. Others swear it's the king's cousin in exile. I once heard she poisoned a bishop with marzipan and never blinked. You laugh. Tilo doesn't. She comes once a season, he says. Always dressed like that. Always alone. Never says a name. Leaves behind double the coin and half the answers. The mood has changed. No more dice. No humming. No muttering complaints about taxes or lice. Just silence, like the whole building is holding its breath. You ask what the person wants. Tilo shrugs. Sometimes a girl. Sometimes two. Sometimes just a room and the darkest wine we've got. No noise. No questions. Leaves by morning. Every time. He leans in, whispering, "One winter, she brought a parchment scroll as long as my arm. Paid a girl to read it out loud while she carved bones into little animals. No one knows why." You nod slowly, because what else can you do with that? A few minutes later, Margot appears at the curtain again and snaps her fingers. "New rule," she says. "No one near the last 3 rooms. I don't care if your legs fall off, you'll find somewhere else to sit. The workers scatter like mice before a broom. You're ushered to the opposite wall, back to your itchy bench." Even Tilo relocates, grumbling something about divine interference. It's not fear that fills the space. It's reverence. No one likes her, necessarily. But they all respect the force of her presence. And that crucifix? Probably real silver. A fringe historical tidbit, during the later Middle Ages, it wasn't unheard of for members of the clergy, or their discarded counterparts, to frequent brothels under disguise. Some were simply seeking escape. Others were collectors of particular experiences. There are records of so-called penitent orders that blurred the lines between sacred ritual and carnal exploration. Historians still argue whether these practices were genuine spiritual deviations or simply dressed-up depravity. An hour passes. The rooms remain silent. Margot hovers like a wasp with a schedule. Every so often, she listens at the curtain with her head slightly cocked, then walks away without comment. You can't help but wonder what's happening in there. Tilo won't say more. "I like my tongue," he mutters. Eventually, the curtain stirs again. The figure exits, robes immaculate, hands gloved, crucifix swinging softly. They pause in the doorway, scan the room once, just once, and vanish into the night like steam from a candle. No goodbyes. No coins in the hand. Just a quiet departure and an echo that lingers longer than it should. Margot exhales audibly. Then snaps her fingers again. Back to work. The hum returns slowly. Dice roll again. A few cautious jokes are whispered, their laughter stunted like trimmed hedges. You catch yourself staring at the hallway she came from. Something inside you wants to ask. Wants to know. But you already know that no one here will give you a straight answer. Later, you hear whispers from a worker combing her hair near the fire. She paid in gold florins, she says. Real ones. Minted in Avignon. Her friend snorts. What's a woman of God doing with papal money? Maybe she was God. They both laugh. Nervously. And somewhere behind you, a chair creaks. The music picks up again. But the room is quieter than it was. You sip what might be wine. It's lukewarm and earthy. And you realize something odd. This brothel has customers. But it also has legends. And you may have just met one. It starts as a tickle. Just under your collar, right where your tunic folds into the hollow of your shoulder. A faint prickling, like a rogue thread tugging against your skin. You scratch it absent-mindedly. Then again. This time on your thigh. Then your scalp. Then behind your ear. You scratch harder, pushing the heel of your palm into your hairline. It's the kind of itch that doesn't go away with one good rub, it migrates, like it's playing tag across your body. Every time you stop scratching, it picks a new target. You look around, hoping this is in your head. It's not. You catch sight of a woman sitting across the hearth from you, elbows on knees, casually picking something from her sleeve. She flicks it to the floor without looking. Another worker behind her tugs at her bodice and mutters, "I swear they're worse after the incense." "Try the vinegar," someone says nearby, holding up a clay jar. Your stomach turns. You ask what they're talking about. The vinegar girl snorts. "Everything. Lice, fleas, mites, God's own punishment. It doesn't kill them, but it makes them polite for an hour." You've hit a new milestone, the moment you stop pretending you're above this place and accept that you're one of them. A flea-bitten, lead-poisoned, vinegar-dabbing part of the medieval micro-ecosystem. You take the jar and dip your fingers into the briny liquid. It burns slightly. You dab it under your sleeves, across your neckline. Someone nearby says, "You'll smell like pickled onions, but it's worth it." A surprisingly mainstream historical fact, medieval brothels were crawling with parasites. Cleanliness wasn't impossible, just unaffordable. Workers might wash once a week if they were lucky, or if someone particularly clean-paying was coming to visit. Lice combs were passed around like community treasure. Fleas lived in the hay-stuffed mattresses. Mites burrowed into skin folds. Scabies were so common it earned nicknames in local dialects, often called the lover's rash or itch of sin. You scratch your wrist. Then the other wrist. The back of your neck feels like a garden of invisible teeth. A young man walks by with a tray of wine, scratching the inside of his elbow with his chin. He notices your discomfort and says, "Don't worry. First night's always the worst. Your skin just has to learn how to give up." He offers you a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Try this." You open it. Lavender. Rosemary. Something that looks like crushed eggshells. Dust it on your chest, he says. Keeps the bugs confused. Not gone. Confused. The level of resignation is almost impressive. You slip into the side room you used earlier and take off your tunic again, this time less self-consciously. You dust the mixture across your collarbone and ribs, sneeze, then press the cloth against your neck. You catch your reflection in the tin mirror. It's a look. Hair tousled, eyes bloodshot, small scratch marks starting to form around your shoulders and jaw. You look like you just lost a wrestling match with a bale of hay, and then rolled in herbs as a consolation prize. You return to the main room, where the mood has sunk again. Not because of taxes or mysterious clients, but because everyone's scratching now. It's a communal event. Even Tilo, who had been strumming something vaguely heroic, pauses to itch under his arm. "Accursed infestation," he mutters. "I once knew a barmaid who bathed in nettles to get rid of it." "Did it work?" you ask. "No," he says. "But she was never cold again." You learn from a passing girl that the brothel recently swapped out its rushes, the hay and herbs on the floor that supposedly keep things fresh. Apparently, they bought cheap straw from a questionable supplier down by the docks. Full of fleas, she grumbles, rubbing her calves raw. You sit back down and try to ignore it. Not just the itching, but the way everyone's dealing with it like weather. An inconvenience, not a crisis. You try to count the scratches on the arm of the girl beside you. 7 visible. Possibly more. You mutter, "I think I have scabies." A man near the fire lifts a cup in salute. "Took you long enough." He's not joking. Historians still debate whether medieval folk fully understood what caused scabies, but descriptions from the time are unmistakable: tiny tunnels in the skin, relentless itching at night, red welts between the fingers and toes. Treatments ranged from sulfur baths to onion poultices to, yes, boiled nettles and goose fat. Some folk tried burning them out, Tilo adds helpfully. Held a candle to their skin. Worked sometimes. Or made it worse. Either way, it was over quickly. You stare at your arms. You're not there yet, but it's good to know your options. You ask if there's any way to really clean up. Tilo chuckles. You could find a bathhouse. Assuming you survive the rats. Or Margot could sell you hot water by the bucket. 2 pence for a trickle. 3 if you want soap. You check your pouch. It coughs at you. You scratch your ear and lean back against the wall. That's when a small girl, not a worker, just a runner maybe, slips past carrying a bundle of linens. You see her wince as something moves in her hair. She stops, digs her fingers in, pulls out a louse. Crushes it between her nails. She looks at you. First time. You nod. She smiles, wide and strangely sweet. Then you'll learn the rules. Number 1, never sleep directly on the mattress. Number 2, sage oil behind the knees. Number 3, never trust a comb you didn't bring with you. You ask what happens if you break all 3. She shrugs. You'll itch to till next Thursday. Or forever. Depends on the moon. You thank her. You don't know why. And you sit there, skin crawling, surrounded by people half laughing and half mad with scratching, and you realize you're not the exception. You're just the newest host. You're starting to fantasize about bathing in boiling wine. Anything hot. Anything clean. Anything that might peel the top layer of your skin off and take the colony of parasites with it. But alas, you remember what Tilo said, 2 pence for a bucket of warm water. You check your pouch again. Still broke. Still tragic. So you do the next worst thing. You ask for water. A woman lounging nearby, are blonde, pockmarked, surrounded by apple cores for some reason, eyes you warily. Water, she repeats, as though you've asked for dragon marrow or a unicorn rental. You nod. Just water. She laughs. Not a cackle. A deep, exhausted chuckle that says, "Ah, yes, another idealist." She points to the far corner of the room. There, next to a chamber pot and a candle stub, sits a barrel. Wooden, lopsided, with a dipper resting across the top. A single scrap of linen is nailed to the front with the word boiled scrawled on it. Encouraging. You cross the room and lift the dipper. It smells like something familiar. Swampy. A bit sour. The color? Let's call it medieval beige. You've seen stew with less floating in it. But you're thirsty, and you've already been poisoned by wine. What's one more roll of the microbial dice? You sip. It tastes like what it looks like, warm, gritty, and somehow earthy. Not in a farm-fresh way. In a my mouth might now be a crime scene way. You cough once, twice. Then shrug and take another gulp. This is your life now. Historically, water was a highly suspicious substance in most medieval cities. Wells were often contaminated with human and animal waste. Streams doubled as laundry tubs and public latrines. Most people drank beer or diluted wine to avoid dysentery, cholera, and worse. But in places like brothels, especially cheap ones, those options weren't always available. Boiling helped, but that assumed someone had the fuel and time to do it right. And here? Boiled could mean left out in the sun for an afternoon. Or someone sneezed in it, and now it's warmer. Behind you, someone says, "Don't drink too fast." You turn to find an older man, grey beard, crooked smile, probably missing half his original teeth, sitting cross-legged near the fire. Why not, you ask? He taps the side of his nose. Shocks the stomach. Makes it angry. My brother drank a whole ladle once and spent 2 days painting the walls of the latrine. You put the dipper down, carefully. He chuckles and chews something that might be tobacco. Or boiled bark. Used to be a priest, he says. Of course he was. Gave sermons. Took confession. Then I confessed I'd rather be here. You sit next to him. He offers you a small root from his pouch. Sucks the bile out, he claims. Or maybe just distracts it. You decline. He points toward the water barrel. That there used to be rainwater. Then someone left the lid off. Got pigeons now. You look again. You can't see a pigeon. But that doesn't mean there wasn't one. Quirky tidbit, there were medieval guides, actual printed documents, that rated the safety of city brothels, including things like cleanliness, lighting, and the quality of water or wine. One 15th century Parisian guide warns travelers to avoid the house by the tannery, for its well sings of death. That's poetic, for you will die. Back in the room, someone begins arguing about who finished the pitcher of ale. A clay cup smashes against the hearth, and Margot appears seconds later with the reflexes of a cat. You pay for that, she hisses. Break my things, I break you. The man slinks away. The room quiets. You stare at your hands. They are not shaking. But they should be. You're learning, the ex-priest says, watching you. How to sit still. How to stop asking questions. You nod. He smiles. That's the first step to surviving the night. You ask him what the second step is. Don't drink the water, he says. You both laugh. It's not a joyful laugh. It's the laugh of people who've given up on expecting anything better. Later, as the fire dies down, the barrel of boiled water sloshes quietly in the corner. A woman dips a rag in it and presses it to a swollen lip. Someone else washes a comb and then uses it to scratch under their sleeve. And you? You try to forget how many times you swallowed. Your gut gurgles. Of course it does. You're trying not to think about what might currently be fermenting in your stomach when something soft and hairy brushes your ankle. You freeze. It wasn't a person. You would have heard footsteps. It wasn't straw either. This was warm. Alive. Quick. You glance down, just in time to see a tail disappear under a bench. No. Nope. Not doing this. You stand, fast. A man seated nearby chuckles without looking up. Rat, he says, sipping from a chipped mug. Or the monkey. Hard to tell when it's moving. You blink. The monkey. He nods toward a darker corner of the room, past the hearth, where the shadows gather thick as gravy. There, on top of a barrel, sits a monkey the size of a cabbage, draped in a red ribbon that's seen better decades. It's chewing something, possibly food, possibly a finger bone, and watching you with the deeply unsettling stillness of an animal that knows it's the smartest thing in the room. Used to dance for the bishop, the man adds. Now it bites for Margot. Of course it does. The rat monkey problem isn't isolated to this one room. As you look around, you realize this whole brothel is alive in ways no building should be. Scratching behind the walls, movement in the rafters, tail-shaped trails in the soot. Everything has teeth here. Even the shadows. You inch toward the hearth for light, checking the floor for movement. There's a loaf of bread nearby, half-eaten, hard as stone, with 2 clean bite marks and a small puddle of something that glistens like oil. You decide not to investigate further. Ever sleep here? You ask the man with the mug. Once, he says. Woke up with a rat on my chest. Looked me right in the eye. Like it was wondering if I was dead yet. You consider stepping outside. Just for air. Just for dignity. But the doorway looks too far away. And your legs aren't listening anymore. You sit back down and lift your feet off the ground. Just in case. A few minutes later, a girl shrieks from behind the curtain. Not fear. Not pain. Just the kind of scream that follows the realization something furry just crawled up your blanket. Margot storms past a moment later holding a broom and a look that could scorch lead. Again, she growls. I told you to tie up the sack. A younger girl shouts back, it chewed through the cord. More scuffling. More squeaks. Something topples. Eventually, silence returns. You ask Tilo, who's materialized again with his ever-loyal lute, whether this is normal. Oh, yes, he says, tuning a string that will never sound right. Every winter. When it gets cold outside, they come in through the cellars. Looking for warmth. Wine. Weak men. Are we talking about the rats or the customers, you ask? He grins. Both. A mainstream fact for your comfort, medieval brothels, especially in cities, were magnets for vermin. Straw bedding, food scraps, leaky walls, and constant foot traffic made them ideal habitats for rats, mice, lice, and the occasional weasel. In wealthier houses, cats were sometimes kept to control the problem. In poorer ones, they became dinner. One brothel ledger from 1392 lists rat bait as an actual line item next to candles and clove oil. You hear another rustle behind you. You don't turn this time. You don't want to know. You lift your knees to your chest and try to focus on the fire instead. That's when the monkey decides to visit. He climbs down from his barrel throne with nimble fingers and saunters over, pausing dramatically beside your bench. His eyes shine like dark marbles. You sit very still. He sniffs the hem of your tunic. Then hops onto the bench beside you like a miniature, plague-adjacent royal. He pulls something from his belt, a string of what might be beads or teeth, and begins gnawing on it, occasionally glancing at you like you are the guest. You don't move. You don't breathe. He scratches under his arm, then offers you the beads. You shake your head politely. He shrugs and keeps chewing. Eventually, he tires of you and scampers off into the shadows again. A girl at the far end claps once. He likes you, she says. You don't answer. You're still too busy convincing your nervous system not to implode. Quirky detail, performing animals in brothels weren't entirely uncommon. Monkeys, dancing bears, trained dogs, anything that brought laughter and distraction to otherwise bleak surroundings. One Florence brothel allegedly had a parrot that cursed in 4 languages and could recite the names of all the local bishops. Scholars still argue whether the bird was trained or traumatized. Later, when you finally do muster the courage to lower your feet, you step into something soft and wet. You freeze. Someone nearby says, "Oh, that's one of the dead ones." You look down. Sure enough, a rat. Not twitching. Definitely expired. You consider screaming. Then decide you don't have the energy. Instead, you slide your foot out of your boot, toss the boot into the corner, and sit back down barefoot. Tilo plucks his lute and begins a gentle song. It's just a rat, he sings, don't scream or cry. It lived a full life in someone's pie. You let your head drop back against the wall. You've survived lead wine, lice, vinegar baths, and now rodent diplomacy. And it's not even dawn yet. You're in the hallway again when you hear it, a sudden, sharp shriek from below. Not the flirtatious kind. Not the mildly irritated, he spilled the wine again kind. This one is raw. Human. And soaked in pain. Then, silence. Then laughter. You freeze, halfway through a scratch behind your ear, because what kind of laughter follows a scream like that? The hallway quiets with you. Everyone seems to pause mid-task, mid-gesture. A worker leaning against the wall slowly lowers her cup. A man in a corner tilts his head toward the stairwell like a dog catching a strange scent. Even Tilo stops strumming mid-chord, the sound hanging awkwardly in the air like an unfinished question. Margot appears, of course. She always does when things get weird. She's already halfway down the stairs before anyone else moves, her skirt swishing like a thundercloud. You follow, not because you want to, but because your body does it before your brain can say no. The stairs groan beneath your feet, each one a little more warped than the last. The lower floor is dimmer, mustier. You didn't know there was a downstairs, but of course there is. There always is. At the bottom is a room you've never seen before, bare stone walls, no windows, one door, half open. It smells like iron. And old wood. And something darker. Margot's already inside, standing over a toppled stool and a man curled on the ground holding his leg. His hose is shredded, his shin bleeding, and there's a dagger nearby that no one is acknowledging. A girl stands a few feet away, arms crossed, jaw tight. She's shaking, but only slightly. Her hair's loose around her shoulders. Her shift is torn at the sleeve. I said no, she says. That's all. Just that. Margot doesn't yell. Doesn't scold. She looks at the man on the ground, then at the girl, then back again. Well, she says calmly, next time don't try and get clever without paying extra. She claps her hands once, sharp as a slap. Two younger boys, runners, errand types, appear at the door. Take him out the back. If he complains, take the other leg. The man tries to speak, but someone jabs a thumb into his side, and he wheezes instead. They drag him out like a sack of wheat. His voice gets smaller with every stare. Margot turns to the girl. You all right? The girl nods, but doesn't relax. Want the room to yourself a while? Another nod. Margot steps over the blood like it's a puddle of water and exits without comment. You're the only one left in the doorway. The girl meets your eyes for half a second, then turns away. You looking for something? You shake your head. Slowly back out. Let the door shut. The hallway breathes again. You ask Tilo later what that was. He doesn't answer right away. Then, self-defense. If you can call it that. You ask if it happens often. He looks at the floor. Not often. Just not never. A disturbing historical truth, violence in medieval brothels wasn't rare. It wasn't even always punished. In fact, in many city records, assaults on sex workers were treated as property damage. Fines were issued to the clients, but rarely enforced. The women had little to no legal protection unless under the direct patronage of powerful men. Even then, justice was transactional. The strange part? The laughter. It wasn't mockery. It was release. The kind of brittle, exhausted laughter you exhale when the worst didn't happen. When someone tried something and failed. In here, that counts as victory. Later that night, the girl reappears in the main room, hair braided now, a fresh shift, chin raised. Someone hands her a cup. She drinks it. smiles at something someone says. No one talks about the blood, or the scream, or the dagger. It didn't happen. Except everyone knows it did. You start to notice the other things now, the bruises on wrists, the scabs just below collars, the limp in a man's walk as he carries a bucket. No one complains. No one dwells. They function. One woman shows you the trick of how to sit without putting pressure on your ribs. Another teaches you how to whistle through your teeth to call for help discreetly. A third offers you a piece of dried mint and says, chew it when the smell gets too thick. No one calls it healing. No one calls it coping. It's just adapting. You glance down the stairwell one more time. It's quiet now, as if nothing ever happened. But you know better. So does everyone else. The sun hasn't risen, but something is changing in the air. A stillness settles over the brothel, not peace, not rest, just the slow drift of a place catching its breath. You sense the hour in your bones. That grey, in-between time when night has overstayed its welcome and morning hasn't yet found the door. And then you smell it. Not incense. Not tallow. Not wet hay or vinegar. Cinnamon. The scent floats down the hallway like a promise. Warm, spicy, familiar, out of place, completely, yet oddly comforting. You follow it, slow and curious, until you reach the main room. And there, before the hearth, is something you absolutely didn't expect. They are praying. For all 5 of them, workers, runners, even the woman who held the basin during Alice's fever, kneeling or sitting, heads bowed. A single candle burns in the center of a low table. A cracked wooden crucifix leans nearby, flanked by 2 small loaves of bread and a bowl of dried fruit. A girl whispers something in Latin. You catch a few words, miserere, pacem mundum. Have mercy. Peace. World. No one's leading. No robes. No choir. Just soft voices, barely audible over the creaking walls and wheezing floorboards. It's not dramatic. Not even particularly devout. It's routine. Tilo sits nearby, not joining in, but watching with that same wistful expression he wears when his lute is actually in tune. Every morning, he murmurs. Before light. Habit, I suppose. You nod. He leans closer. Some pray for forgiveness. Some pray they wake up. Some just like the cinnamon. And there it is, a steaming cup being passed around, a thick, murky drink made from old wine dregs, bark, and a generous helping of cinnamon and cloves. The smell wraps around you like a memory of kitchens that never belonged to you. Margot appears, hair pinned back, eyes heavy, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She doesn't interrupt. She just sets down a basket of day-old rolls and walks away again. The prayer continues. No candles are snuffed. No grand finale. Just heads lifting, one by one, eyes opening, breaths releasing. A fringe historical tidbit, brothels in the Middle Ages, especially those located near churches or within semi-legal red light districts, often maintained some form of ritualized prayer. Not enforced religion, but small acts of piety, like lighting candles to Saint Mary Magdalene, the unofficial patroness of the fallen. Some women even wore saint medallions beneath their shifts. Just in case. The cinnamon drink gets to you. One of the kneeling women, older, wrinkled hands, a permanent squint, offers the cup without ceremony. You sip. It's thick, sweet, a little sour. But the warmth hits you like a glove sliding over your insides. Your body thanks you with a full-body shiver. This is the closest thing to comfort you've had in hours. The woman smiles faintly. warms the blood, keeps the ghosts quiet. You don't ask what ghosts. Someone begins humming a slow, wordless tune with the rhythm of lullabies and processions. Not mournful. Not joyful either. Just there. Like the bricks or the fleas. And it hits you, hard and fast. They do this every morning. After the wine, after the scratching, after the blood, after the cold and the sorrow and the laughter that wasn't quite laughter. They gather like clockwork and try to stitch the night back together with whispers and cinnamon. You glance around. There's the red-scarved girl, cradling a chipped cup in both hands. There's the boy who fetched water, blinking slowly beside a crooked stool. There's Alice, pale but upright, a new shawl draped over her shoulders. You sit beside them. You don't say anything. You don't need to. Even here, even now, there is this, a pause. A ritual. A breath drawn in defiance of everything outside. Historians still argue whether these morning rituals were signs of resistance or submission. Was it a return to faith? Or a final thread of control in a world determined to unravel you? Maybe both. You hand the cup to the person beside you. Your fingers brush. Someone giggles softly, not mocking. Just the sound of someone remembering they still have a voice. Tilo strums his lute once. Just once. A low, rich chord. And then, as the room slowly brightens with the thinnest silver light leaking through the slats in the shutters, the prayer ends. No amen. No blessing. Just the scraping of stools and the shuffle of bare feet returning to work. The day has begun. And here, that means pretending the night never happened. You make the mistake of thinking it's over. That the worst is behind you. That prayer and cinnamon have smoothed the jagged edges of the night. That perhaps you can slip away now, quietly, respectfully, and emerge into the morning light like someone who merely dreamt this place, rather than lived it. So you rise, stretch your sore limbs, and head for the door. You're not running. Just drifting. Ghost-like. You're practically part of the furniture by now. Who would even notice? Well, there's a figure standing by the exit. Arms crossed. Back to the wall. Bald head shining in the dawn sliver that seeps through the shutters. He's huge. Not fat, dense. A tree trunk of a man with a permanent scowl and a nose that looks like it's lost at least 3 fights with door frames. He doesn't say anything. Just stares at you like you're a loaf of bread he suspects of hiding cheese. You try the door. It doesn't budge. Behind you, someone mutters, new ones trying to leave. The bouncer, because of course that's what he is, tilts his head. Morning rates not paid, he grunts. You blink. I didn't stay the night. You breathed inside, he says. That counts. You glance around for help, for logic, for someone to confirm this is ridiculous. But no one meets your eyes. No one laughs. They've all seen this before. 2 copper, he says, holding out a hand the size of a shovel. 1 if you give back the pillow. You didn't even use a pillow. Still, you pat yourself down, fishing through the limp folds of your pouch. 1 coin. Barely enough to insult him with. Half now, you try. He doesn't move. You consider asking Margot, but she's busy haggling with a woman over linen scraps and doesn't look like she's in the mood for charity. Or witnesses. Rules are rules, says a girl sweeping nearby, not unkindly. You stay past prayers, you pay. Even if you don't touch anyone. Even if you don't eat. You glance at the bouncer again. His face remains impressively neutral, like he was carved from old bread. You offer the coin. He takes it, inspects it, then lifts the latch on the door with one heavy finger. And just like that, you're free. Well, technically. The door creaks open and light slams into your face like a slap. It's not bright, just grey morning, the kind that makes the cobblestones look like wet teeth. But it's enough to make your eyes water. The air outside is cold. Clean. Sharp. You take one step and feel the weight of the brothel fall off your shoulders. Not all at once, more like a slow, reluctant peel. You hadn't realized how tightly it clung to you. And yet, you stop. Not because you want to, but because you realize something. You have nowhere to go. You came here on a dare. Out of boredom. Out of morbid curiosity. Now, you're louse-bitten, half-starved, broke, and suddenly extremely aware that medieval city streets aren't exactly bursting with welcome mats for people who smell like vinegar and emotional trauma. You turn back slightly. Not toward the brothel. Just enough to glimpse the door behind you. It's already closed. Tilo's voice echoes faintly from inside. A new song. Something about a girl, a goat, and a very unfortunate misunderstanding involving a chimney. You take another step away from the building. And then a voice calls out behind you. Oi! You spin around. It's the boy who emptied the slop buckets. He's standing by a side window, holding out a small bundle wrapped in linen. You forgot your soap. You blink. I didn't have soap. He shrugs. Now you do. You take it. It's barely the size of a walnut, grayish, crumbly, smells faintly of something that might be lavender or mold. A gift, he says. For surviving. You nod, not trusting yourself to speak. And then he adds, next time, bring your own blanket. And don't drink the brown wine. That one's for the pigs. Then he vanishes back inside, the window clicking shut behind him. You look down at the soap. It's melting slightly in your hand. Historically, guest charges in brothels were common. Staying past curfew, occupying furniture, even just loitering near the fire could be added to your tab. There were even cases where clients were charged for not following through, emotional labor, 14th century edition. Some brothels employed bouncers like this one, called doormen or heavies, often ex-soldiers too injured or jaded for combat. Their job wasn't to protect you. It was to protect the house. You walk away. One foot in front of the other. Down the crooked alley, past the gutters where yesterday's stew is still steaming, past the cart of turnips and the pile of firewood and the cat that looks at you like it knows. You don't look back. Not because you're proud. But because if you do, you might go back inside. And you're not sure you'd come out twice. You're 10 paces from the brothel door when you hear your name. Only no one should know it. You stop. Turn. But no one's there. Just the sound of a rooster crowing far too close, a cart squeaking over uneven stone, and the city yawning itself awake. You shake it off. Chalk it up to exhaustion. Or lice whispering your secrets. Then you hear it again. Hey. You. More accurate. Less unsettling. You glance to your left and spot Margot herself, standing in the narrow alley between the brothel and a crumbling warehouse wall, arms folded, mouth twisted in a half-smile. You did not see her leave. How far do you think you're going? She asks, voice mild. You answer honestly. I don't know. She nods, like she expected that. Good. That's the right kind of answer. She reaches into the folds of her shawl and pulls out, or of all things, a handkerchief. It's clean. Probably stolen. Maybe from a bishop. She presses it into your hand. For the sweat, she says. And the rest. You stare at it, then at her. Why give me anything? Because you forgot to pay for the pillow, she replies without skipping a beat. You blink. What pillow? She leans in, whispering just loud enough for only the rats and you to hear, the one you didn't use. Which means it's still available. Which means it still costs you. You look down. The coin pouch hanging from your belt is already lighter than light. If it were any emptier, it would float away. Don't worry, she says. We've added it to your tab. You don't have a tab. At least, you didn't. You open your mouth to argue, but she stops you with a finger raised and a look that could curdle milk. You breathed our air. You scratched our fleas. You sat on our chairs, used our bucket, drank the brown stuff. You even listened to Tilo. She smiles again. That's participation. You sigh. So what now? She shrugs. Now nothing. Go on. Be free. Chase glory. Bathe. But remember, next time, bring coin. Or don't bother knocking. Then she's gone. No footsteps. No flutter of cloak. Just vanished. You stare at the handkerchief in your hand. It's embroidered with a tiny red flower. Possibly blood. Possibly art. You turn back toward the street. At the corner stands a man with a donkey cart selling questionable apples. He nods at you. First time at Margot's, he asks. You nod. He points to your shirt. She got you for the linen fee, didn't she? You look down. Your collar's unbuttoned, your sleeves wrinkled, and there's a faint chalky M scratched into the hem. Linen's extra, the man says. Even if you never took it off. He hands you an apple, bruised and warm. On the house. For surviving. You take it. Bite. It tastes like it fell down the wrong well. You eat it anyway. Mainstream historical fact? Brothels in the Middle Ages often charged for everything. Not just the company, but the use of the bed, the blanket, the wine, the towel, the bowl of water, the chair. Some even kept ledgers so detailed they included candle use by the minute. And if you tried to argue? Good luck. The debt always outlasted the complaint. You take one final look at the alley behind you. It's quiet now. Respectfully so. Like it's waiting for its next visitor. You step away. And that's when the bouncer appears again. From where, you couldn't say. One moment the alley's empty. The next, he's beside you like a shadow with arms. Forgot something, he says. You brace yourself for more payment. But instead, he drops something into your hand. Your lice comb. The wooden one. The one with the little carved bird. You'd left it on the bench. Consider this your lucky token, he grunts. Then he walks away, boots barely making a sound. You stare at the comb. Still warm. You stuff it into your pouch next to the soap nub and the handkerchief. Your entire survival kit. Proof you were there. Proof you escaped. You walk on. Down the street, past the carts and the beggars and the cat sleeping on a bundle of firewood. You pass a monk preaching to 3 geese and a woman selling bread that smells like it resents being bread. The city goes on, oblivious. But you've changed. You've got invisible welts, a phantom itch, and at least 2 questionable liquids sloshing in your gut. But you're out. Margot may have your dignity, your coin, and possibly your shirt seam. But you have your comb. And somehow, that feels like enough. You make it as far as the fishmonger's stall before you realize your legs have stopped working properly. Not entirely, they still bend, technically, but they've taken on that shaky, hollow quality you associate with fever or hangovers or walking away from a building you weren't entirely sure you'd survive. You sit on a barrel. Bad idea. It tips. You tumble backwards. Land in something soft and slightly damp. A chicken stares at you. He's got the brothel legs, someone says behind you, and laughter follows. Not cruel, just familiar. You climb back up with what grace you can manage and limp to a quieter corner, near a shuttered bakery that smells like yesterday's flour and not much else. You pull out your lice comb. Just to hold it. To anchor yourself. Then the shaking starts. Your hands first. Then your stomach. Then that invisible sense behind your eyes, like the floor just dropped away, and you're still standing on it. Because the truth is, you don't feel okay. You're out. You escaped. But something's wrong. And it's not just the fleas. It's your joints. Your throat. Your head, which feels swollen with pressure, like your thoughts are too big and your skull's too small. You cough. And that's when you feel it, the unmistakable weight of dread in your lungs. You sit back against the wall and breathe, slowly. Try to remember every sip, every touch, every corner of that place. Try to pinpoint the moment you inhaled something wrong. Or drank something that wasn't quite dead yet. There were a lot of moments like that. You lean forward and spit. It's just saliva. No blood. No bile. But it doesn't feel right. A woman walks by selling ribbons from a wooden tray. She pauses, takes one look at you, and says, "Ah. Brothel sickness." You blink up at her. She nods, kneeling beside you. Don't worry. Most just sweat it out. Some go blind. Few die. You stare. She reaches into her tray and pulls out a sprig of something green and waxy. Chew this. You do. Because questioning strange plant matter given to you by a ribbon vendor doesn't feel like the worst thing to happen to you today. It's bitter. Sharp. Like chewing on regret and pine needles. She smiles. You leaves. Or maybe not. Hard to tell this early. You cough again. She stands, pats your head, and wanders off. Welcome to the next level. Mainstream historical fact? Contagion spread rapidly through brothels, especially the lower-end ones. You didn't need intimacy to catch something, just bad air, shared utensils, or a cough from the wrong hallway. Respiratory infections, skin diseases, and blood-borne pathogens were commonplace. And then, of course, there were the red roses. Yes. Those roses. The term the pox had many meanings in the Middle Ages. But the most infamous of them all, syphilis, was just beginning to make its mark on Europe by the end of the 15th century. Boils, rashes, fevers, dementia. Love's little goodbye note. You remember a rhyme someone whispered in the brothel? A rose for love, a sore for truth. It blooms in fire and wilts in youth. You hadn't asked what it meant. Now you don't have to. You lean your head back. The sky is pinking at the edges. Morning is almost official. But your body is not ready to join it. You curl slightly, arms wrapped around your knees. The fever hasn't hit hard yet, but it's close. The way your thoughts are lagging. The way your skin feels like it's not attached correctly. You feel like you're melting. From the inside out. You hear voices. But they don't register. Like wind blowing through a closed window. Someone steps closer. Sits beside you. It's the old man from earlier, the ex-priest with the crooked grin. Told you, he says, offering a crust of bread. You don't come out the same. You wave off the bread. I think I'm sick. He nods. Of course you are. You should be. You ask what to do. Walk until your legs give out, he says. Then crawl. Then sleep in the hay behind the church and hope the rats don't fancy a nibble. That's what most do. You ask what he did. He shrugs. Never left. Still haven't. Just learned to call it home. You glance back toward the brothel, now far behind you. Just another shadow among rooftops. But it still feels like it's holding your pulse in its palm. The old man chuckles. Worried you caught something? You nod. He points to your heart. If it's in there, you're already gone. If it's in here, he taps his head, you've got longer. Either way, you'll remember. You stand. You wobble. You start walking. There's no destination. No healer waiting. No friend's doorstep. But forward is better than sitting still. Even if your legs aren't listening. Even if your lungs rattle like kindling. Even if your blood feels different now. Because some sicknesses don't kill you right away. Some follow you home. You walk like someone moving through a dream that won't end. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. One step after another, as if your feet are trying to outpace whatever now churns in your veins. You pass a man selling leeks from a cart. A butcher sweeping blood from his threshold. A child dragging a stick through a puddle so dark it reflects nothing. You don't stop. Not even when your gut lurches with that all-too-familiar sensation, betrayal. You lean against a wall, heave once, and there it is, brown wine, chewed mint, and regret. It splashes onto the cobbles in a steaming mess that no one looks at. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. It trembles. Your skin is slick with cold sweat, and your fingers feel like they don't belong to you. You try to breathe. In. Out. But each breath is tighter than the last. Not painful. Just wrong. And then you hear it. A chant. Soft. Familiar. Repeating. You follow it, not out of curiosity but out of instinct. Like a moth chasing heat. It leads you through an archway, past a narrow alley of rotting vegetables, into what might generously be called a chapel. No stained glass. No altar. Just a crooked wooden cross and benches that look more like abandoned fence posts. But the chant is there of 3 voices, maybe 4. Wordless and low. You slip in through the back. And that's when you see it. A woman hunched over a book far too large for her lap. Her hands are ink-stained. Her face, lined and tired. She sings as she writes. A boy beside her grinds something with a mortar. Another girl tends a pot on a brazier. The room smells of thyme, wax, and vinegar. It's not a chapel. It's an infirmary. Of sorts. The woman looks up. Doesn't blink. Doesn't ask your name. She just says, sit. You do. She touches your forehead. Nods once. You were with Margot's lot. It's not a question. She dips a cloth in the steaming pot, wrings it out, and presses it to your neck. You flinch, not from pain but from the sudden return of sensation. Too warm, she asks. You shake your head. Too real. She doesn't smile. Good. That means you're still here. You ask what she's doing. She replies, trying to catch the sickness before it spreads. You ask what it is. She shrugs. Could be plague. Could be rock gut. Could be sin. A useful shrug, that. She gives you a cup of something thicker than tea, thinner than porridge. It tastes like licorice and metal. You drink it because refusing doesn't feel like an option. The ones who collapse before they leave Margot's are the lucky ones, she says. We know what to do with those. But the ones who walk away. She shakes her head. They're the ones who carry things. You sit very still. Not just diseases, she adds. Memories. You think of the girl with the red scarf. Of Alice in her fever. Of the monkey and the blood and the quiet morning prayers. The woman beside you hums again. Her song is slow, circular, like a wheel turning. You ask her name. Agnes, she says. Of course it is. Saint Agnes. Patron of girls, lambs, and, in some twisted corners of folklore, of brothels. The irony is so rich you almost choke on it. A quirky historical note, there are stories, unverified, but persistent, of women named Agnes who opened sanctuaries for brothel workers. Not quite churches. Not quite clinics. Places of soft beds, warm rags, and silence. Historians still argue whether these were acts of piety or simply older women remembering what it felt like to bleed in a cold room alone. Agnes places a clay amulet in your hand. For protection, she says. You ask, from what? She looks at you. From remembering too much. She wraps your shoulders in a rough blanket. It smells of herbs and smoke and old wool. You'll sleep now. You nod, not because you want to, but because there's no strength left to stay awake. And as your head dips forward and the floor seems to rise toward you, you hear Agnes's voice again. Low. Firm. Fading. Don't come back to her, child. Once is surviving. Twice is becoming. The room goes dark. But not empty. Never empty. You wake to the sound of boiling. Not the angry, churning kind of a kitchen pot, but a steady, patient simmer, like the room is steeped in its own tea. The scent of thyme and something more bitter clings to the air, thick enough to taste. Your head aches. But not in the stabbing way. It's dull, heavy, like your thoughts are moving through wet linen. You try to sit up. Everything protests. Then you realize you're still in the infirmary. Or Agnes's den. Or whatever this place is. The blanket's still over you. Your pouch is still on your hip. Your lice comb is tucked under your arm like a sleeping pet. Agnes sits nearby, scraping dried roots into a bowl. Her movements are efficient. Controlled. You're back, she says without looking at you. Was I gone, you croak. Your voice feels rusted shut. Not quite. You hovered. Wobbled a bit. Drooled once. But not enough for alarm. You're too tired to ask what she means. She stands, grabs a bowl, and ladles something dark and aromatic into it. Eat. You take it. Sips first. Then deeper. It tastes like boiled leather and hope. The warmth crawls down your throat and rests in your stomach like an old cat. She watches you. Not kindly. Not coldly. Just assessing. Whatever you caught from Margot's, she says, hasn't settled. That's good. Means your blood's still arguing. You ask how long you've been here. Half a day. A night. You moaned about a monkey. That was new. You nod. That tracks. Do you remember? She asks. Everything. She nods. That's the real illness. You don't disagree. She gets up and starts sorting herbs into tiny pouches. You'll leave soon. It doesn't sound like a suggestion. Where do people go after? You pause. After Margot's. Some go home. Some go quiet. Some go mad. You stare at your bowl. And you ask. I never left, she says. I just changed rooms. The pot bubbles again. She brings over a small cloth bundle and drops it in your lap. When you go, take this. Wipe with it. Burn it. Trade it for a turnip. I don't care. But take it. You unwrap it. It's another handkerchief. Embroidered with a small lamb. You look up at her. Saint Agnes, she says flatly. We all pick our jokes. You sit in silence, sipping broth, breathing in the herbs. Your body isn't fixed. But something in it has realigned. Not healed. But adjusted. Tolerated. You rise unsteadily. Agnes hands you a small file. For the mornings. And the memories. You tuck it into your pouch, next to the lice comb and the soap nub and the other handkerchief. You're building a collection of absurd survival tools. She watches you head for the door. Do you want to know what you caught? She asks suddenly. You stop. You turn. You caught the knowing, she says. And it doesn't go away. Mainstream truth. Medieval healers, especially women, walked a narrow line. Some were licensed. Most were not. But in every town, every city, there were always one or two who knew the things others wouldn't say. The difference between heat fever and soul fever. Between too much wine and too much being seen. Some wore relics. Some used chalk. Some simply listened. Agnes falls into the last category. You nod to her. She nods back. Then you step into the light. It's dusk now. A warm, gold-tinged haze hangs over the street like someone tried to sugarcoat the cobblestones. It almost works. People bustle past, carrying baskets, bread, gossip. You feel out of sync. Like your footsteps don't match the street anymore. You walk in their world, but slower. Changed. A vendor calls out to you. Soup? Only half wormy. You keep walking. The city is loud, smelly, alive. But you? You're something else now. You glance back. Agnes's door is closed. And beyond her, far down the alley, barely visible, the brothel's rooftop cuts the sky like a jagged tooth. You walk on. And for the first time since this all began, you think, maybe you'll live. Not well. But long enough to laugh about it someday. Maybe. Your feet find the river before you do. 1 minute you're following a goose cart down a cobbled slope, the next you're staring at the slow, grey ribbon of water winding past the city's edge. It smells of algae, rotting rope, and the kind of secrets only mud can keep. You settle on a mossy stone and let your pouch fall beside you with a tired clink. The lice comb slips out, catching a ray of light just enough to mock you. You lean forward, elbows on knees, and watch the current. It looks clean from here. It isn't. But it looks it. Two boys upstream are splashing each other, both barefoot, one completely naked. You can hear their laughter, a sound so sharp and real it makes your chest ache. Across the river, a cluster of women are scrubbing linens against flat rocks. One of them pauses, waves a rag in the air, and lets out a hoarse version of a folk song you vaguely remember from the brothel. And just like that, the memory slips in again. You try to resist it, but you can't. The smell of singed herbs. The monkey's tiny fingers wrapping around your sleeve. The sound of someone crying into a bucket 2 rooms over. Margot's voice, that's participation. You close your eyes. The wind picks up, and you feel it tug gently at your collar. Not cruelly. Almost like a hand brushing your neck to see if you're still warm. You are. Barely. You reach into your pouch, pull out the handkerchief with the little red flower, and dip one corner in the river. You wipe your face with it, forehead, cheekbones, jaw, then stare at the rag. The dirt comes off in streaks. But the feeling doesn't. You catch your reflection in the water. Your face looks thinner. Sharper. But your eyes are the biggest change. They're not wider. Just older. A part of you wonders if this is what surviving looks like in this century. Not pride. Not triumph. Just the ability to carry it all without sinking. A fisherman approaches, leading a mule with 2 wicker baskets strapped to its sides. He glances at you and grunts, "Long night." You nod. He offers a small loaf, crusty and slightly misshapen. "Too hard for me, teeth." "Yours if you've got 'em." You take it, tear off a corner, chew. It tastes like relief. "You from the red house?" he asks, motioning vaguely toward the city. You nod again. He chuckles. "That place'll hollow you out. My sister worked there once. Came home with a limp and a monkey's tooth in her apron. Never told us the full tale." You think, for a moment, of saying something. But what? That she probably sat through the same morning prayers? That she might have met Agnes? That the monkey still might be there, watching from the rafters, eating the rest of her story? Instead, you say, she was lucky. He nods. Only lost the leg. Kept the soul. And then he's gone. Back to the water. Back to the world. Historians still debate whether experiences inside medieval brothels left long-lasting psychological trauma, or if, in a world where brutality was common, it simply folded into the daily noise. The term melancholia was often used to describe the long ache that followed such places. Not depression as we name it now, but a spiritual bruising that never quite healed. You feel that bruise now. It's in your shoulders, your stomach, your temples. But mostly, it's in the silence that follows your own thoughts. You throw a pebble into the water. Watch the ripples widen. Then you reach back into your pouch and pull out the small phial Agnes gave you. You hold it to the light. Swirl it. The liquid inside clings to the glass like honey. Or blood. You uncork it. Take the smallest sip. It burns. Not badly. Just enough to remind you that you're still here. You put the cork back in and pocket it. Then you stand. Brush off your tunic. And begin walking again. Away from the river. Away from Margot's. But not away from what it gave you. That you carry now. Like a whisper in your bones. Like a scar with its own heartbeat. By the time you reach the market square, you've mastered a few things. 1. How to walk without limping. It's not grace, exactly, more like controlled collapse. You tighten your weight, lean into your hips, and keep your eyes low. People don't ask questions when you look busy. 2. How to ignore the itch. The one that's no longer just on your skin but under it. Maybe fleas. Maybe shame. Either way, scratching only makes it worse. And 3. How to hear everything without reacting. A woman shouts about onions. A child weeps over a lost ribbon. A drunk man stumbles out of a tavern mumbling a brothel rhyme under his breath, something about a baker, a nun, and a misunderstanding involving boiled pears. You keep walking. You reach a fountain, dry, cracked, occupied by pigeons. You sit on its rim and watch them peck at invisible crumbs. You envy their simplicity. You suspect one of them might be cleaner than you. A boy runs past, nearly collides with your leg, and vanishes down a lane. He's laughing. You're trying to remember the last time you laughed. Not the accidental, breathless kind. Real laughter. The kind that unravels tension like string. You search your memory. You don't find any. Instead, you find the ledger. You remember it from the brothel, tucked behind the bar, its leather cracked, pages thick and curling with damp. You'd only caught a glimpse. But the entries had stuck with you. Patron 63, paid 2 pence, stayed 6 hours, bled from nose, claimed it was wine. Rosie, 3 days unpaid, mother ill. T, unknown bartered monkey tooth for soup. Aloud. You hadn't meant to look. But the ink had called to you. In that moment, you'd realized something. This place wasn't chaos. It was order, disguised as disorder. Margot knew everything. Every coin. Every hour. Every mistake. You hadn't walked through a fever dream. You'd walked through a business. And now? You wonder if you're still in its books. Margot said you had a tab. It was a joke. Probably. But what if it wasn't? What if somewhere, someone has noted the one who wandered? Didn't pay. Took soap. You glance behind you. No one's following. Still, the sense of being catalogued lingers. Mainstream historical fact? Many brothels kept ledgers as meticulous as any merchants, recording client names or aliases, services, durations, even mood reports. These books weren't just for accounting. They were power. Insurance. Evidence. Some were eventually used in legal cases either against the establishment or by it. There's even a story, fringe, yes, but delightful, of a brothel in Nuremberg where a ledger entry simply reads, "He wept, paid double, left humming." You wonder what your entry would say. You don't have long to wonder. Because you hear it, faint, metallic, the bell. Not church. Not town crier. Margot's bell. It's distinct. Tuned too high, a note that slices rather than rings. You freeze. Across the square, you see a small girl in a brown dress tugging a goat behind her. She wears a red scarf. You don't move. You don't breathe. She passes. The scarf is a different shade. Her goat is far too smug. But for a heartbeat, you're back in the brothel. In the hallway. In the heat. In the thick air of too many lives compressed into one building. You shake your head. Stand again. Walk faster. Not away. Not toward. Just moving. Because stillness now feels like exposure. The ledger lives in your mind. Its pages turn when you close your eyes. You begin to keep your own, mentally. Tab. 1 lice comb, found. 1 soap nub, gifted or planted. 1 prayer, overheard. 1 bowl of brown wine, mistake. 1 fever, lingering. 3 memories you didn't want. 1 name you can't forget. You reach the edge of the square and pause at a stall selling gloves. The vendor smiles. You look like you've seen something. You answer truthfully. I think I did. She nods. Offers you a glove to try. You slip your hand in. It's rough wool, tight across the knuckles. Warm. It'll wear in, she says. So will everything else. You hand her your last coin. It's not enough. But she gives you the gloves anyway. Maybe she sees something in your eyes. Maybe she's had a night of her own. You pull them on and continue walking, the sound of the bell still echoing in the back of your skull. You may have left the brothel, but some ledgers keep writing long after the ink has dried. You're far from Margot's now. The alleyways have widened into roads, the buildings have lost their slouch, and the smells have mellowed from fermented dread to freshly turned earth. You pass a mill house, a chapel, a stable where a sleepy horse flicks its tail at invisible flies. And still, you don't feel clean. You thought time would peel the night off you like sweat. You imagined, somewhere around your 10th hour away, the experience would shrink into a memory. A thing to laugh about. A footnote. But it hasn't. Because the brothel didn't just rub off on your clothes or your hands. It settled deeper. Into your thinking. Every glance from a stranger, calculated. Every open door, a trap or a toll. Every kindness, suspicious. You've started to inventory people. The way they speak. What they ask first. Whether they offer food before questions. Or questions before food. You haven't smiled in hours. And you've stopped noticing that. Still, the world moves. You reach the village edge just as the sky flattens into a warm amber glow. The light no longer slices, it softens. Even the birds seem to sing more politely here. You sit on a fence near a field of something low and leafy. Turnips, maybe. Or lies. And for the first time, you allow yourself to close your eyes. Behind them, echoes. Not sharp anymore. Just soft, folded things. The girl with the red scarf, twirling a thread around her finger. The bouncer, pressing your comb into your palm like a medal. Tilo, humming something nearly musical beside the fire. Agnes, with her hands like bark and her voice like vinegar-soaked parchment. And Margot. Oh, Margot. She wasn't just a madam. She was an institution. A judge. A host. A gatekeeper of secrets no cathedral would dare hold. You wonder if she thinks of you. Or if you were just another half-page in the ledger, scribbled between a stolen spoon and a lost shoe. You check your pouch again. The file from Agnes. The lice comb. The soap nub. The lamb handkerchief. The gloves. Trophies of survival. Or maybe tokens of something else. You breathe. And for the first time, it's not painful. There's space inside you now, and not emptiness, but room. Room to understand that the night didn't break you. Not fully. It bruised. It twisted. It painted your thoughts in darker tones. But you're still here. And now, you know. You know what it costs to sit in that red-lit room and breathe that air. You know what it means to survive something no one ever prepared you for. And you know, deep in your marrow, that you wouldn't last a second night. Because surviving once was a fluke. Doing it twice? That's commitment. And you never signed up for that. You stand. Stretch your arms wide, like you're trying to find where your edges begin again. And then you laugh. Quietly. Without bitterness. Just one short burst of absurd joy. Because you lived. And now you can leave the memory here. In this field. On this fence. With the turnips. Maybe. And now, as the day folds gently into dusk and the world settles into quieter shapes, you allow your thoughts to soften too. You feel the weight of your body, its aches, its weariness, but also its persistence. The breath in your lungs, the steady rhythm of your feet finding ground, the way the air finally feels cool against your face. The images from the brothel still flicker at the edges of your mind, frayed sheets, flickering candlelight, laughter where it shouldn't have been, but they no longer press in so close. They float now. Weightless. Distant. Part of the night, not the day. And you begin to forgive yourself. For going. For staying. For feeling too much. Or not enough. You begin to let the silence wash through you. The breeze over the grass. The slow creak of the fence rail beneath your hand. The faint rustle of leaves nearby, whispering secrets you don't need to understand. There's nothing left to escape. Only the gentle invitation to rest. To let your mind quiet. To trust the dark again, not as a threat, but as a soft place to fall. So tonight, let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breath come slower. Let the memory drift, like steam from a cooling bowl of broth. You've made it through the night. And now? You're safe. You're warm. You're far, far away. Sleep well, traveler. You've earned it.